Our protagonist, Juyeon, was the one who defeated the Demon King in another world and became the hero who protected the continent's peace. He was happy to see the people of that world relieved, but he was even more glad that he could finally return to his original world. The god then spoke to him, praising him for doing a great job and for choosing to save the world once again. However, he responded that every time he saw her, it was always about choices. Due to the resets, he always had to start from scratch, which meant he had no choice at all. He then asked the god if she was really going to send him back to his original world this time, and she confirmed that she would. He reminded her that she had kidnapped a talented person from another dimension and made him work for 20 years. He then asked her if she wasn't going to give him any compensation, like letting him keep his memories or retain some magic. She told him that while he was there, time in his dimension had stopped, and that his time had remained the same, meaning he hadn't lost anything. He clenched his teeth in frustration, but all he could do was sigh and agree with her. He then told her to just hurry up and send him back. Yet, she assured him that compensation for the time and effort he spent there would surely be given, though, like before, he wouldn't remember it himself. The god then gave him a god's fragment and told him she would give him a piece of her power as a gift. Depending on his choices, the flow of the dimension would change, and the world would shift according to his will. This left him speechless for a moment. He asked her if she could at least give him a hint, but she simply replied, "No." Irritated, he asked her why everything was always a no, and shouted at her to at least let him keep his memories of the continent. She only stared at him with a smile and pointed her huge finger at him. Then, she told him to go. Panicking, he tried to tell her to wait because he wasn't done talking. However, she didn't listen, and proceeded to send him to his original world, telling him to return to the place where his journey began, the world that would determine his fate. She informed him that she would continue to watch over his journey. As he fell through the space between worlds and felt his body slowly dissolving into the air, he tightly closed his eyes. Later, he woke up because of the bright light coming from his window and sat up, yawning in exhaustion. He wondered what was happening as he felt strangely refreshed. He checked his phone and saw a text from his manager asking if he was coming, if he was asleep, and if he knew that the morning shift started at 7 a.m. He panicked upon seeing it and rushed outside, knowing he was super late. A moment later, he arrived at the convenience store. The manager angrily scolded him, saying that if he continued being that late, it would be hard to keep working together. He respectfully bowed his head and repeatedly apologized to his manager. He felt down, wondering why his life was always this broken. Hours later, during his break, he ate bento as usual and sighed, realizing that his job at the convenience store wouldn't last long either. With overdue rent piling up, 1 or 2 part-time jobs wouldn't be enough. He then wished he had awakened. But then he was confused when a panel suddenly appeared in front of him, showing that he had activated the unique trait Skill Master, which shocked him. Awakened individuals are commonly called users, and it's been 5 years since augmented reality, like something out of a fantasy novel, enveloped the world. Along with the fields that began appearing across the earth, the world has long since started revolving around the new resources that come from them. Users are granted the power to conquer and pioneer these fields, which are dominated by monsters. Even menial tasks within these fields can generate income, which is why everyone wants to become a user, even though it means stepping into the unknown, because rewards more tempting than the danger are scattered everywhere. However, not all users make a fortune. While some awaken with high-grade unique traits from the start, others do not. At the pinnacle stands the world's #1 ranker. The first to reach level 70 and possessor of the SS-grade unique trait Dragon Speech was Muhammad Al. One day, Al uploaded a video to his personal channel. Countless people clicked on it out of curiosity, and they couldn't look away for even a second. In the video, Al was facing a swarm of monsters. Calmly, he activated his power through his staff, and viewers witnessed the dream of all mages, magic that anyone who had read even one fantasy novel would admire. Al then released a barrage of powerful meteors, obliterating the monsters without breaking a sweat. The viewers were stunned, unable to believe they were witnessing such a spectacle with their own eyes. They thought it was insane. This was an A-grade field after all. No one could believe that a level 70 user could cast such a devastating spell. The meteors destroyed everything in their path, and even a monster capable of wiping out a city couldn't withstand them. Everyone wondered how a mere monster could ever oppose the wrath of nature itself. At the end of the video, Al stated that the skill they had just seen was the SS-grade Meteor Rain. He then announced that exactly 1 week from the video's upload, if anyone could showcase magic more splendid and powerful than Meteor Rain, he would give them a ring artifact as a gift. Everyone knew the ring he was referring to, the Elemental Ring, the first and only publicly revealed SS-grade artifact, and the ultimate accessory every magic-based user dreamed of possessing, even in their sleep. However, not everyone was impressed by Al. A man asked a woman why she thought so, since just offering such a prize was already a huge deal. The woman replied that Al was basically declaring he wouldn't give the elemental ring away at all. She questioned where in the world there could be anything more powerful than an SS-grade skill. She then showed the man how Al had set a trap by making the condition of winning based on magic, with Al himself as the judge. Irritated, she added that the judging was subjective, meaning Al had no real intention of giving away the ring. She then shouted that she was jealous, and that Al was infuriating. Though people couldn't help but envy Al's flex, the video became a hot topic. Yet in the end, it seemed like a story from another world that no one could ever catch up to. Or so it seemed. A few days later, Juyeon headed into the forest. When he felt far enough from the city, he stopped. With a single motion of his fingers, a meteor rain even more powerful than Al's dropped from the sky, annihilating the ground around him, except for the patch he stood on. Shocked but amazed, Juyeon laughed in awe and shouted excitedly that Al's skill was awesome. He then uploaded the video to social media under the anonymous name user034512, making sure his face wasn't visible. Everyone who watched it was left speechless, their mouths agape. As the comments poured in, one thing was certain. Al had lost, and now the world was left wondering, who was that person? Users upon awakening are typically granted one unique trait. A unique trait enhances the effects of specific skills and is commonly understood to function similarly to a class in games. The well-known unique traits revealed to the world are Dragon Speech, Miracle, Regeneration, and Lethal Strike. A user with Dragon Speech becomes a mage more powerful than a dragon. A user with Miracle becomes a healer, said to be capable of reviving even the dead. A user with Regeneration becomes a tank, who can regrow limbs and continue fighting. A user with Lethal Strike becomes a warrior capable of defeating any enemy. However, Juyeon didn't know what his trait, Skill Master, was truly about. A moment ago, Juyeon had been busy at his computer, searching for answers. He knew that when evaluating unique traits, the first thing to look at is the grade, because the higher the grade, the better the effects and the more subtraits it has, or so they say. Among users, known grades range from F grade to SS grade. When he opened his status window, it revealed that his trait was an X grade unique trait, an unknown category, but he was sure it must be an incredible cheat ability. However, his stats didn't agree. They were so low that he wondered sadly whether high-grade traits weren't supposed to come with stat boosts. He found it hard to believe. Getting all stats at 1 wasn't easy even for a normal person. Still, he comforted himself by thinking at least he still had the trait. The system then explained to him that Skill Master could use all skills. One of its passive abilities was Passive Income, which stated that every 24 hours at midnight, it would generate 10 SP up to a maximum of 100 SP. Juyeon asked if that was all, just 2 subtraits, and began to wonder if he was right in thinking that users could learn any skill using a skill book. He also wasn't sure what SP even was. He didn't yet know whether Skill Master was good or bad. Then the system presented him with his first tutorial quest. Try copying a skill so the EX grade skill copy would activate. The reward was 20 SP and an event video. The system further explained that skill copy allowed him to replicate a skill, but it would be deleted daily and each use would consume 1 copy attempt. A quest appearing immediately upon awakening was news to him. He knew that to copy someone else's skill, he would have to go to a field. But with level 1 stats, that would be a one-way ticket to the grave. So he decided to ignore the quest for now and instead looked up skill videos. That's when a video of Al appeared. The system analyzed it and confirmed that Al's skill was Meteor Rain, grade SS, and displayed all its details. Then the tutorial event triggered, a linked event from the tutorial quest, and the system informed him that a special tutorial map would now be opened. This was a one-time opportunity. It explained that copied skills could only be used within the tutorial map, and while inside, all of Juyeon's stats would be increased by 999. The system then asked if he would like to copy Meteor Rain. Juyeon was shocked. It could even be copied from a video? That's when he tested Meteor Rain in the field. Back in the present, Al was watching the viral video while calmly humming and sipping wine. Someone then picked up the remote and turned off the television. A woman asked Al if giving away the elemental ring was really that great of an idea. But Al just responded by asking her what the odds were that a skill obtained less than a week ago would fall into someone else's hands. She replied that there were plenty of similar skills in the world. Still, he pressed, what if it was an SS grade skill with the exact same name? She argued that there was no confirmation that it was SS grade, and it could have been staged to look similar, especially since no trace of such a field had been found. But Al firmly stated that he was sure it belonged to at least an SS grade unique trait. He then instructed her to pass along a business card with the ring. Finally, he informed her that they would stay cautious for now, so it was best not to approach directly, only to say the ring was a gift for someone he hoped to become friends with in the distant future. Meanwhile, at the convenience store, Juyeon was excited as he watched the insane view count on his video and remembered that the system had even recorded a video for him. A child nearby was asking him how to spell Tteokbing jelly, but he ignored her, too absorbed in his excitement. He was relieved that the system ensured anonymity since his face wasn't shown and thought not uploading it would have been foolish. The kid tried to get his attention again, but he ignored her once more, busy thinking that if he kept growing like this, there wouldn't be a trait more broken than his. Suddenly, he snapped to attention when he heard a deep male voice calling him, irritatedly telling him that his kid was asking if they sold Tteokbing jelly. Juyeon immediately acted as if he hadn't understood the child earlier, though he had purposely ignored her, and told the man that he would sell it. When the customers left, he sat down with a sigh, thinking there was no way they'd actually give away an SS grade item. Still, he hoped that by some miracle, they really would. He dreamed of earning enough money to live comfortably forever and becoming as strong as Al, basking in the attention of the entire world. He smiled, realizing that just a short while ago, it was something he couldn't even imagine. Then, he stood up and stretched, feeling like he might actually be able to do something. Just then, he received a comment on his video. It was from Al. Al commented that he would give him the elemental ring with no conditions attached. Other viewers responded with disbelief, asking if Al had gone crazy for offering an SS-grade ring, while others were simply amazed. Juyeon stared at his phone, frozen in disbelief. He then read a comment stating that Al had once claimed he'd give anything to someone who brought him an S-grade staff, and when someone actually did, Al paid 200 billion won in cash. That reassured Juyeon. The ring would truly be his. Soon after, without expecting anything more, Al's secretary, Lee Soo-yeon, met with Juyeon regarding the delivery of the elemental ring. After handing it over, she escorted him home, informing him that Al would like to meet him at least once. Juyeon remained stunned in silence the entire time, up until he was back home, wearing the elemental ring on his finger. He asked himself if the ring was real, and the system confirmed it. It was the elemental ring, grade SS, which significantly boosted many of his stats just by wearing it. The reality of everything finally sank in. Suddenly snapping to action, he sat up, realizing it wasn't the time to lie around. His magic stat had gone up by 40, and he thought he should head into a field immediately. He opened his status window again, but upon seeing his stats, still at 1, he concluded it was probably too much for him. He knew he needed armor, but that required money. He headed to his computer desk and checked his video views. He guessed that the ad revenue might be enough, but he wanted to avoid verifying his identity through the channel. Staring at the screen, he wondered if there was a better way. Then an idea came to him. He remembered that just doing emergency healing near a field could earn hundreds of thousands of won. He knew healing skills were the real deal, and even those who looked down on healers admitted that fieldwork paid well. He then set himself up on the sidewalk with a handwritten sign offering C-grade healing that could treat amputations, fractures, and F-grade or lower status ailments. His pricing? 500,000 won for amputation, 200,000 won for fractures, and 700,000 won for status ailments. He thought it would be a jackpot if even one person came per day. He was sitting outside the D-grade swamp field at Seoul Grand Park, since all the prime spots were already taken. While checking his phone, he made a mental note to bring something next time to help pass the time. Without noticing, someone carrying a severely injured woman rushed toward him. Trying to stay positive, he told himself it was good news and reassured himself that there was no danger outside a field, so nothing serious could happen. But then, the man stopped right in front of him. When Juyeon looked up, he saw a blood-soaked man glaring down at him. Juyeon froze, stunned, and sweating in fear. The man then ordered Juyeon to get his skill ready, which immediately irritated him. He wondered what the man's attitude was about, using informal speech right off the bat. He was reminded of a customer at the convenience store who once barked at him to hand over a red cigarette and wondered if this man thought he was still some part-time convenience store clerk. He was annoyed because even though the healing skill was a copied one, it was a C-grade skill with some impressive effects. He felt he had to say something. Angrily, he told the man that the price was 2,000 up front. But before he could say more, he noticed the man's expression remained completely unchanged. Feeling defeated, Juyeon reluctantly softened his tone and guided the man toward the treatment area. As they walked, he caught the rotting smell of blood in the air, and anxiety kicked in when the man suddenly pulled out the woman's severed arm. The man slapped the arm back against the woman's shoulder and shouted at Juyeon to hurry. Juyeon panicked. He had only seen scenes like this in movies, and this was his first time dealing with something so gruesome in real life. He nervously wondered if the skill would activate properly, but reminded himself he had to pull it off. Then he activated his copied skill, Light of Recovery Grade C. Doing his best, he attempted to reattach the woman's arm. Later, his work complete, he finally lay down, completely drained. But then he recalled that the man had demanded healing 3 times. He couldn't believe it. He knew that if he hadn't had the elemental ring, which restored 20% of his mana, he would have been in serious trouble. He looked at his hand, recalling the severed arm, and wondered what on earth was happening inside the fields. Still, he decided not to think too much about it. He was sure of one thing. He could make a lot of money and could now quit his part-time job. He began thinking about what he should do with his new income. Investments, stocks, or maybe even crypto. He opened his luxury strawberry yogurt, tossed away the lid without bothering to lick the excess yogurt off it because he figured he was rich now, and enjoyed it in his huge bed. He wondered if this was what luxury tasted like. Still, he reminded himself that he needed to earn more SP for growth. Just then, the system displayed a new tutorial quest. Raise the level of a subtrait. It explained that this was one of the key methods for acquiring SP, which was essential for growing the Skill Master trait. The reward for completing the quest was 100 SP and the activation of 2 subtraits. However, the system warned him not to forget. Raising the level of passive income was the top priority for growth. He found it strange that traits could have levels, but thanks to the system, he figured out that traits could be leveled up by spending SP. It would take 100 SP to level up passive income. Since the quest reward was also 100 SP, he considered it basically free, especially because leveling up would unlock a new subtrait. That meant he absolutely had to complete the quest. Opening his SP window, he saw that he had 70 SP left. He calculated that since passive income gave him 10 SP per day, he could complete the quest in just 3 days. As he was thinking through what to focus on next, someone knocked on his door and informed him that his room service order had arrived. Excitedly, he responded that he was coming, convincing himself that this was research on skill combinations, not a hotel vacation. He let the staff bring in the food, and once the table was filled with delicious, expensive dishes, he turned on the television and began eating. From a video, he learned that S-grade and higher skills were practically extinct. He realized that even if he copied them, they would vanish after midnight. He gave thanks to Al for casually revealing an SS-grade skill, which was extremely rare. Then he changed the channel, wondering if someday he might be able to keep copied skills permanently by leveling up. He decided to organize his skills, dividing them into categories for immediate use and for later, and saved them into playlists. He then placed Meteor Rain, Explosion Shot, Ice Spear, and Ice Wall as his top 4 skills. Just in case, he added Body Hardening, and also included Teleportation Technique because it looked cool. As he kept adding more, he thought to himself that internet skill shopping was the best. Bro is shopping skill, like it's clothes. A moment later, he had finished all the food, enough for a whole party, and leaned back on the sofa comfortably. He had registered as a healer with the user association and had taken care of everything. Happily, he lay in bed wondering how much his value would skyrocket if he could use healing, buffs, and magic. He even fantasized about some stunning beauty sending him a love call. A few days later, he was back at his usual spot outside the D-grade field. The woman from the other day approached and told him she was really grateful for what he did back then. He looked at her, speechless and confused. The woman asked if he didn't remember her. He replied no, and added that she was far too beautiful to have had any connection with him. She then reminded him that her brother had brought her to him for healing a few days ago, pointing toward the same arrogant man. He finally remembered and realized she was the one with the severed arm. He had thought the woman was the man's girlfriend, since he had spent so much on her. But now he knew she was his sister. She shyly told him she was glad she could thank him in person because if he hadn't been there, she might have actually died. She then asked if he was currently in a party, to which he simply replied no. She asked again if he belonged to any guild, and again he replied no. She smiled and said that was perfect, because their party needed a temporary healer. Her offer startled him. He wasn't ready to step into a field yet, and he knew he needed to decline. But then she sweetly asked if he'd like to grab a coffee and chat if he had time, adding that if he gave her his number, she'd contact him later. She really tries to riz our boy. He blushed and was about to agree, but suddenly, both of them were shocked by a loud scream. A man was dragging another severely injured man, shouting that they'd gotten wrecked in the field and needed a healer who could treat status ailments. Hearing the sound of money, he rushed to them and activated his healing skill. After treating the injured man, the comrade handed him payment. Juyeon then glanced back at the woman. With tears in his eyes, he apologized and explained that joining a party was just too much for his level right now. She laughed awkwardly and reassured him that they could carry him. They had an S-grade tank and an S-grade mage. But Juyeon quietly collected his money and folded up his mat. Confused, she tried to stop him, but he sprinted away while repeatedly apologizing. He didn't dare look back, haunted by the memory that even S-grade users had barely escaped from a D-grade field just moments ago. He kept running, face flushed with embarrassment and regret, wondering when he'd ever get the chance to party with a beauty like her again. He swore to himself that he'd quickly gather money and SP and become a true golden spoon mage. Later that night, Juyeon lay on the balcony of his hotel room gazing at the city lights and thinking that this was finally the day he had been waiting for. Just then, the phone next to him rang. It was exactly midnight. The system popped up, informing him that he had obtained 10 SP and asked if he would like to upgrade passive income to level 2. He agreed. With the upgrade, passive income increased to level 2, boosting his SP gain every 24 hours at midnight from 10 SP to 50 SP. Amazed by the 5-fold increase, he wondered if he should check his quest rewards. The system then showed that he had completed the tutorial quest and received 100 SP as a reward, along with a unique trait subtrait and trait bestowal level 1, which grants one random F-grade unique trait to a copied skill. He understood that unique traits represented a user's tendencies. While users could all use the same skills via skill books, the power of those skills varied significantly from person to person, fundamentally due to the differences in their unique traits. This naturally placed Skillmaster at a disadvantage. Without unique traits, copied skills would always perform worse than those of the original user. However, Meteor Rain in the tutorial map had been an exception. Now he wondered if copied skills from this point on would also come with unique traits. It felt like a cheat, though the word random still bothered him. The system then presented his options. Light of Recovery. Heals severed and fractured areas, restores 15% health, and cures E-rank or lower status abnormalities. Mana requirement, 25. Mana cost, 250. a unique trait that increases magic attack power by 10%. He knew he'd have to test things himself to be certain and wondered what to try first. Thinking it was about time to graduate from being a healer for hire, he was suddenly presented with a new tutorial quest to hunt a minimum of 20 monsters using copied skills, level up to unlock more diverse skill copying, and access additional skill master content. The rewards included 200 SP, an upgrade to skill copy X grade, and sub-trait level 2 activation. He stared at the quest window, speechless. It truly felt like someone was watching him in real time and assigning quests. Glancing at his phone, he wondered whether he should copy that flame magic video for practice. Playfully, he thought that since the traits were random, he couldn't expect anything amazing. But before he could think further, skill copy activated on its own. It copied Fireball, grade E, a flame orb that could be thrown within a 20-meter radius. Mana requirement, 10, mana cost, 70. Along with the skill came the unique trait Ignition, grade F, which applied a grade F burn effect for 60 seconds to any target hit by flame-type skills. Juyeon couldn't help but wonder if someone really was behind the quest window. The next day, he arrived at the entrance of the Daegwalyong sheep farm in the Cape. He stood at what felt like the boundary between reality and the field. He calmed himself, reminding himself that he had spent all his money on gear. Even if it was cost-effective, it was still decent enough. Regaining his confidence, he shouted a proud farewell to his days as a healer for hire and welcomed himself to the hunting field. A few days later, people on social media were buzzing about a psycho who was massacring mobs with fireballs at the sheep farm. Some guilds had even tried to recruit this fire psycho, but he turned them down, leading many to wonder if it was because he didn't like the nickname. Juyeon, however, remembered the 3 no-name guys who had asked him to join their guild. That wasn't why he declined. He reminded himself that he had once rejected an offer from an S-rank beauty. He then questioned if he really laughed while hunting, which might have been why people were calling him a psycho. Checking the video, he saw a monster rushing at him while he repeatedly threw fireballs. He remembered smiling and even laughing out loud as he eliminated them. Watching himself, he was speechless and slightly guilty at how excited he'd gotten over how easily the mobs were dying. Having completed the tutorial quest to kill 20 monsters, he received 200 SP and unlocked skill copy EX grade and sub-trait level 2, efficacy level 1, which reduced the mana cost of copied skills by 10%. He also gained 800 SP. Though he was running out of mana, the reduction in mana cost kept him going. Then, he noticed a boss raid post in the beginner user group. The comments were asking if the Fire Psycho was the one who had done the Obsidian Bear raid, an event where only users level 15 or below were eligible for rewards. People were talking about the insane damage, recalling the bear going berserk. The memory hit him suddenly. He immediately stood up and then dropped to his knees in front of his computer, worshipping the #1 ranked user, Al, while replaying one of Al's past videos. A few days earlier, in the field, the Obsidian Bear had appeared, throwing users into a panic as they faced the massive monster. At that moment, the system presented Juyeon with a new tutorial quest: defeat a field boss monster with a reward of 500 SP. Realizing the system wanted him to kill a boss, he focused. The bear charged at the users, but before it could reach them, Juyeon launched a barrage of fireballs in its direction. The bear stumbled back under the relentless assault, and the other users turned to see who was responsible. They saw Juyeon calmly playing with a fireball between his fingers, completely unfazed by the stares. He continued to ignore the crowd, visibly excited as the bear roared in pain and fury. Eventually, he stopped casting, and the bear was no longer visible through the flames. When the smoke cleared, everyone was shocked to see the bear lying motionless on the ground. A user asked if it was really over. Was it really that easy? But just then, the bear stirred and transformed into its berserker phase. It roared, activating Obsidian Bear's Roar, grade A. The roar reduced the stats of everyone in the area, all attributes by 3 and strength, agility, and vitality by 2. The users were stunned, trembling in fear. They couldn't even lift their swords. The team leader tried to rally them, but before he could, the bear furiously swung its claw. Fortunately, the tank managed to block the strike with his sword. Meanwhile, Juyeon stood to the side, staring at a new additional tutorial quest. Copy a boss monster's special skill, with rewards including 200 SP and sub-trait level 3 activation. The system explained the skill. Obsidian Bear's Roar, grade A, triggered when HP dropped below 50%. It reduced all lifeform stats by 3 within a 30-meter radius. If the affected stats were lower than the casters, they'd be further reduced by 2. Additionally, for every 10 lifeforms exposed to the roar, the caster's stats increased by 3, no mana cost. Juyeon was astonished by its strength. He activated skill copy and successfully copied the roar. The system also applied Oblivion, grade F, a trait that removed the berserker trigger and instead added another +3 to all stats per 10 lifeforms exposed to the roar. He couldn't believe he could use such a skill without any conditions, and without any mana cost. It was completely broken. But he reminded himself that copied skills vanished at midnight, so if he didn't use it now, he'd be a fool. He immediately activated Obsidian Bear's Roar and unleashed it. However, the users around Juyeon were affected as well, and all of their stats were further reduced by 3. It shocked everyone. Trembling, drained, and unable to move. They mistakenly thought the obsidian bear had roared again, not realizing it was actually Juyon. Meanwhile, his strength, agility, vitality, and magic power continued to rise, fueled by their suffering. He walked calmly toward the bear, while the users behind him remained unable to stand. He raised a finger and summoned a fireball. Without hesitation, he hurled it at the bear. The creature let out a deafening scream as it burned to death, leaving everyone stunned in absolute shock. With that, Juyon defeated the bear, completing both the additional tutorial quest and the main tutorial quest. He leveled up twice and received 700 SP along with the activation of Skill Copy EX, grade subtrait level 3. Yet he simply stood still, a huge smile spreading across his face, thinking how exhilarating it all was. The bear collapsed, dead. Juyon was startled when the users behind him suddenly began cheering. They shouted that it was incredible. Embarrassed, he quickly pulled up his hood to cover his face. Somehow, the cheering users looked familiar to him, leaving him wondering what that strange feeling was. Just then, the system announced that it was beginning the process of absorbing the obsidian bear's soul. All users present received a permanent +1 stat boost across the board. Juyon was amazed. He could feel the change and asked if this was the legendary boss monster soul he had only heard about. A field boss's level was typically at least 10 levels higher than the field it appeared in. If players tried to overcome that gap by bringing in high-level users beyond the field's level limit, the contribution system would prevent them from gaining anything. The boss's body would vanish, and no items would drop. It was a cruel system designed to ensure fairness, but also high risk. Despite the danger, users still hunted field bosses for one ultimate reason: item drops. Field boss corpses yielded valuable materials and could drop gear worth hundreds or even thousands in currency. Their bodies were, in essence, made of gold, but Juyon wasn't interested in that. He was just thrilled that his strength stat had finally reached 2. The soul absorption bonus allowed all raid participants to permanently boost their stats, and for him, that was worth more than any drop. Suddenly, the other users approached him, praising the raid's success and congratulating him for his role. They admitted he was the MVP of the battle, alongside the raid leader. But then one of them jokingly shouted that it was to be expected from a psychopath, startling Juyon. The raid leader stepped forward, explaining that they had prepared for injuries once the boss went berserk, but Juyon's overwhelming damage output had allowed them to get through safely. Everyone had worked hard, but his contribution stood out. The leader then opened his item status window. It displayed the pitch-black dragon gauntlets, grade F, with E-grade defense. They increased strength by 3, and if health dropped below 30%, they activated berserk grade E, increasing all stats by 2 for 24 hours. The leader commented that the gauntlets were excellent overall, though the activation condition was a bit risky. Juyon agreed. Being under 30% health meant walking a razor's edge. The leader then explained that the boss item and materials would be distributed through the player association and asked if anyone had objections. But before anyone could answer, a voice interrupted. A man stepped forward with 2 enormous bodyguards and offered to buy the boss item for 90% of its appraised value, in cash. The leader asked who they were. One of the users whispered that those men were known as boss item hunters. They showed up like ghosts whenever a field boss dropped loot, always ready to buy everything up. Apparently, they snatched up all the valuable items these days. Still, the leader thought to himself that if they were offering cash up front, it might actually be a sweet deal. Juyon considered that there were all sorts of strange people in the world and wondered what the suited man and his bodyguards were really after. When the man snapped his fingers, one of the bodyguards opened a suitcase overflowing with cash. The man stated that payment could be made immediately. Juyon stared at the suitcase, stunned, his mouth hanging open at the sight of the shining stacks of money. In that instant, his thoughts shifted. Whatever those men were up to didn't matter anymore. Cash up front was unbeatable, and now all he needed to do was hunt like crazy. Only a few days later, though, he found himself back at square one, sitting outside a dungeon, selling healing services, and feeling utterly defeated. He questioned the value of having earned nearly 10 million won when the armor he needed cost 63 million. The price left him in disbelief. The saleslady, seeing his shock, informed him they had only 2 sets left in stock. In a panic, he turned and ran off, shouting over his shoulder that he would definitely come back. Juyon thought that if only he still had access to the obsidian bear's roar with the oblivion trait applied, he could focus solely on hunting. Fortunately, thanks to the tutorial reward, he could now copy boss monster skills. Still, requiring his health to fall below half just to activate the roar made it impractical. At least he had some fun with it in another field before it disappeared. With no customers around, he decided it was a good time to spend his saved stat points and SP. Opening his status window, he saw he was level 8, with weak base stats and 7 unallocated points. He reflected that while a swordsman fit the fantasy archetype, this world didn't allow for do-overs. With no other choice, he assigned all 7 points to magic power, increasing it from 41 to 48. Next, he turned his attention to his SP and used 500 to upgrade his skill copy subtrait to level 2. As a result, his daily copy uses would increase from 1 to 2 at midnight. Before he could fully enjoy the improvement, a system panel appeared with a new tutorial quest. The objective was to complete various types of quests, highlighting that daily quests were one of the key ways for skill masters to gain SP. The reward included 300 SP and the activation of unique trait subtrait level 3. The system explained that daily quest level 1 granted one F rank or higher quest every midnight. His current task was to use skill copy twice, which would yield 80 SP. He wondered what would happen if he copied the same skill twice. Choosing Healing Light, he activated his copy and immediately gained the conservation unique trait, grade F, which reduced mana usage by 5%. Curious if the unique trait would change on a second copy, or if he would simply receive another version of the same skill, he decided to test it. When the system told him the skill was already copied, it also asked if he wanted to create it as a new skill. Without hesitation, he agreed, and was stunned to receive an exceptionally rare trait. Excited, he wrote on his board an offer for a 5% experience buff lasting 5 hours, priced at 1 million won. Though it caught users' attention, no one approached at first. Taking a deep breath, he loudly promoted the offer, claiming that such an opportunity was limited and wouldn't come again soon. The users began to move closer, intrigued. Some questioned whether experience buffs even existed, as they had never heard of them before. One skeptical user speculated that he might just take the money and disappear. Juyeon held his calm, smiling outwardly despite his inner impatience. He mentally urged them to rush him like a pack of wild dogs and help him make 60 million won. Just then, someone stepped closer and stopped in front of him. Juyeon looked up, confused. A woman pulled down his hood, greeting him warmly. She reminded him it had been a while and asked if he was still uninterested in hunting with them. Juyeon instinctively covered his face as the aura of the beautiful woman hit him, but he managed to compose himself enough to explain that, as she could see, he was currently open for business. She smiled brightly and, with a knowing tone, guessed that he hadn't yet gotten his first customer. She then casually stated that she and her brother would take the offer. Juyeon gasped in disbelief but quickly collected himself, respectfully welcoming them and guiding them to the right position. The man, slightly unsettled, felt a sense of déjà vu and wondered aloud if it was just his imagination. Juyeon began casting Healing Light on both of them. As promised, it increased their combat experience by 5% for 5 hours. After the effect was applied, the woman paid him and handed him her user card, which identified her as an S-rank illusionist known as Flames of the Apocalypse. Her name, Kim Hyeji, and contact number were also listed. She encouraged him to call her later, explaining that their team was in real need of a skilled healer. As she walked away with her brother, she told nearby users that Juyeon's buff was real, and personally guaranteed the 5-hour duration and 5% experience increase. Her confident endorsement immediately drew attention, and users began rushing toward Juyeon, eager to receive the buff. He felt deeply grateful for Hyeji's support, and we can see it clearly on his face. With renewed energy, he urged the crowd to form a line, promising he would cast the buff on each of them as soon as his mana recovered. Meanwhile, Hyeji and her brother walked toward the field. Her brother remarked that although she once called him a complete pushover for helping people, she was now doing the same, approaching a newbie player with no visible gear. She reminded him of what she had already said before. With her handling burst damage and him being reliable as a tank, their offense and defense were already solid. The only missing piece was a healer. She added that Juyeon's rare experience buff hinted at the possibility of a highly useful unique trait. Her brother pointed out that Juyeon was still just a beginner, but she argued that this made it even more meaningful. They needed to act before anyone else realized his potential. As they entered the field, monster lizards charged at them. Before her brother could step forward to tank, Hyeji unleashed her firestorm, instantly incinerating the monsters in front of them. Her brother sighed in relief, and she responded with a wink, noting that no one could predict whether a player like Juyeon might someday become an incredible ranker. The next day, outside the user shop, Juyeon hummed happily. He was now wearing his dream set, Rekta's leather armor, grade S, which increased all his stats by 2 and was considered top-tier gear. Shouting with joy, he celebrated the reward of all his hard work. Yet, he also wondered whether passive income wasn't actually better than earned income. Opening his status window and checking the system, he saw that passive income level 2 now granted between 50 and 200 SP daily at midnight. Screaming in excitement, he declared that this was exactly what he needed. He felt relieved knowing that SP would accumulate even if he stood still. Still, he reminded himself that trait bestowal level 2 required 2,000 SP, daily quest level 2 needed 3,000, and skill copy level 3 cost 4,000, totaling 9,800 SP. Doing the math, if he earned the maximum 200 SP per day, it would take 49 days to reach his goals. He was speechless at how steep the cost was, but decided not to let it weigh him down. As nearby people stared at him talking to himself, he glared back and refocused. He needed to raise his stats smoothly and told himself that a field boss run was the next step. Pulling up his hood, aware that his identity as a healer was becoming known, he wondered whether it was time to resume playing the role of a hidden master. Soon after, he arrived at a new field, only to find the ground thick with mud. Cursing loudly, he lamented how the dirty terrain was ruining his expensive new armor. He questioned why this particular field had to be situated inside a mudflat. Eventually, he reached the entrance to the F-rank field known as Garorim Bay. Judging from the conditions, he concluded that melee DPS and tanks would be nearly useless here. He suspected this location was popular among newly awakened users, remembering how the sheep ranch had been much cleaner and more pleasant. He thought that if field-level restrictions didn't exist, he wouldn't have to struggle this hard just to collect boss souls. Juyeon recalled a community post that lectured newbies on the most important rule when participating in a field boss raid, a rule that applied to all raids. It warned that field bosses were especially dangerous and carried a high risk of death. Therefore, the #1 rule was to never apply to a random recruitment post expecting an easy ride. Despite the clear warning, he had ignored it, reasoning that things had gone fine during the Pitch Black Bear raid, so this one should be manageable too. However, just moments later, he regretted it. Watching users flirt with each other on the side, he bit his lip in jealousy. He wondered whether he had come to join a raid party or to watch a group date. A man then approached him, seemingly mistaking him for a woman, but quickly realized otherwise. Juyeon grew frustrated at the man's disappointed reaction. He had simply reversed his name for his nickname without much thought, but now people assumed he was a girl. Looking to the side, he noticed that he must have unintentionally taken one of the female spots in what appeared to be a 5 versus 5 matchmaking raid. Seeing another man silently sulking nearby, Juyeon felt like shouting at the group that they should have checked more carefully before recruiting. The raid leader then announced that the briefing would begin, since everyone had arrived. Juyeon sarcastically noted to himself that it wasn't going to end as just a group date after all. The leader went on to say that although some might already be familiar with the strategy, he would explain it again just in case. He explained that the Garorim Bay boss, the mudflat crab, increased its speed every time it was hit with a debuff. Therefore, no one should apply any debuffs, not even self-inflicted ones like bleeding. The goal was to kill it without causing wounds as much as possible. He added that debuffs raised the crab's stats, and if too many stacked, the boss would trigger a special skill. The leader, sounding overly confident, claimed that he had defeated the mudflat crab 8 times already, and that there was nothing to worry about. The woman next to him, seemingly impressed, flirtatiously expressed her trust in him. Juyeon began to wonder if the supposed special skill was actually the stat gain from debuffs itself. He suspected that in this crab's case, debuff might as well be synonymous with buff. Smiling to himself, he guessed the encounter might be more rewarding than it seemed. Moments later, the leader moved swiftly to kill a monster. However, turns out the monsters were only clam-sized, which left Juyeon stunned. He watched in disbelief as the others enthusiastically crushed them, acting as if they were facing lethal threats. He couldn't believe they were posturing so proudly while hunting monsters that looked like ingredients for clam noodle soup. The leader then proudly declared that, as a seasoned veteran, he would protect everyone. The users cheered for him, but before long, a long, segmented monster burst from the ground. Without hesitation, the same confident leader who had positioned himself at the front sprinted backward. Juyeon felt the urge to ask where he was going, especially after just declaring he would shield them. The leader then shouted that the mudflat crab would only appear once a certain number of monster corpses had piled up, so they needed to kill all the trash mobs too. The users coordinated quickly, aiming their arrows and unleashing them in unison, successfully killing the monsters before they could get close. Juyeon was impressed. The users really were executing their skills like professionals, though he reminded himself that being flashy in an F-rank field wasn't anything to brag about. Still, he wondered when the main event would finally arrive. Suddenly, the ground split open as a massive, sharp mouth lunged out of the earth, devouring the long monster corpses from earlier. The entire field began to tremble violently. The leader announced that the boss was coming and that the raid would begin immediately. He urged everyone to focus and gather information. The mudflat crab finally emerged. The leader explained that the crab only moved left and right, so they should always keep it directly in front of them and only move forwards and backwards. Juyeon stared at the towering crab in awe. The system then presented its data. Change resistance, grade A. The crab could resist all stat-altering effects from buffs and debuffs. Each buff or debuff stacked would increase its stats by 1. If 5 or more buffs or debuffs were active, all of its stats would gain an additional 5 points. Juyeon grinned wide as he read the system's analysis. From his perspective, he had hit yet another jackpot. The crab crawled sideways, causing the users to retreat in a rush. But then, without warning, it changed direction at high speed and began to pursue them. While his party was busy engaging the boss, Juyeon was deep in thought. He recalled the skill description and deduced that, since no conditions or duration were listed, the crab's stat-boosting ability must be a passive skill. The more buffs or debuffs applied, the stronger it became, and that possibility excited him. However, his excitement quickly deflated when the party leader issued an order for everyone to use only physical attacks. Juyeon stared at him, questioning why the main tank was making strategic calls. He then remembered the earlier explanation about how debuffs increased the crab's stats. It dawned on him that even continuous physical attacks could cause bleeding, which was itself a debuff. As the users loosed another synchronized volley of arrows, he realized the strategy. The tanks would draw aggro while ranged attackers slowly chipped away at the crab. That was likely why the leader had recruited so many ranged DPS members. But Juyeon knew it was too slow. He wondered how they were supposed to defeat a monster of that scale without inflicting any wounds. The party leader then stepped forward with dramatic flair, proudly declaring that it was his time to act. Juyeon simply wondered if the man should have stepped up sooner. The leader turned to Hyoju, asking her to cast a buff, which she happily did, pouring her heart into the spell. Watching the two, Juyeon couldn't help but think their role-playing was cringeworthy, but decided to let them carry on. He had already figured out the real solution. The crab needed to be taken down with one decisive burst of power. Then he sensed a powerful magical energy near him. Opening his eyes, he saw a complex magic circle forming beneath the leader's feet. It shocked and confused him. The system displayed information about the skill. Radiant Power, Grade SS. It applied 4 buffs with an additional 1 per 50 mana at the cost of 1000 mana. If the user possessed an S rank or higher buff type unique trait, the duration was doubled. If the caster's mana exceeded 150, the skill would apply only A rank or higher buffs. And when used on oneself, the duration doubled again, and the effects increased by 50%. Juyeon stared at the leader and Hyoju, stunned that an SS rank buff skill was being used in a place like this. A memory came to him from a few days earlier. While buying his dream armor at the user shop, the sales lady had asked if he recorded videos or broadcasts. Flustered, he had shaken his head quickly, nervous that she might recognize him. But she had simply mentioned that field footage uploads were becoming popular, especially among users roaming the field. She explained that they had just the item for someone like him. A recorder with cutting-edge OIS anti-shake functionality that allowed for clear, vivid battle scenes. She had added, a bit too cheerfully, that if he ever found himself in a massive, overwhelming field battle, he could record his final moments in HD, something for future relatives and acquaintances to remember him by. He had been left speechless and even asked her to repeat what she just said. Now, adjusting the glasses recorder he'd bought that day, he couldn't believe that what he'd brought just to capture boss skills was actually turning out to be useful. He understood now that combining the crab's change resistance, which increased stats with each applied buff or debuff with Radiant Power, a multi-buff skill, could be devastating in the right hands. He glanced over at Hyoju, who stood looking cheerful, and wondered how a powerful buffer like her had ended up in such a low-rank field. The leader then dramatically unsheathed his sword and announced that he would draw the crab's aggro. Juyeon watched silently. When the leader finally called out for everyone to focus their attacks, Juyeon stepped forward and launched a powerful fireball at the crab, hitting it squarely. Though apologetic for interrupting the leader mid-pose, he knew he couldn't let the moment slip. Once he confirmed that the fireball had hit, he clenched his fist and activated his trump card. Explosion. The skill detonated embers within a 20-meter radius, causing the crab to burn severely from the inside out. A savory aroma began to fill the air, catching the attention of the users. Some asked aloud what it was, remarking that the smell made them crave rice mixed into a crab shell, topped with leg meat, ready for a big bite. They didn't seem to realize they were describing the field boss itself, now perfectly cooked and transformed into a golden-orange delicacy. The raid leader stood frozen in fear, sweating and speechless. Still unable to relinquish his ego, he shouted for everyone to fall back, warning them that the crab might activate a desperation phase. Rushing to the crab's body, he began slashing it repeatedly until item drops spilled from its remains. The system then displayed a notification to all users. The soul of the field boss, Mudflat Crab, Grade D, had been absorbed. As a result, their mana increased by 1. The leader turned to the others with a smug expression, while Hyoju clapped and praised him for his amazing performance. The other users, however, looked on in stunned silence, clearly embarrassed on his behalf. Juyeon, watching all this unfold, found the scene painfully pathetic. Suddenly, the system interface appeared before him, notifying him that Change Resistance, Grade A, had been registered to his boss skill list. He was elated. He had secured exactly what he wanted. Now all that remained was to test the synergy between Radiant Power and Change Resistance. Eager to leave, he told the party that they should wrap up and head home. But when he turned to them, he was met with puzzled stares. They asked if their assumptions were correct, that his unique trait must be at least A or S rank, and praised him for his incredible hard carry. They also thanked him for making it so easy to claim the soul reward, and to his surprise, one of the women asked if she could get his number. He responded awkwardly, clearly flustered. Before things went further, the leader yelled at the group, telling them they were getting too excited and reminding them to return for the item distribution. He glanced at Hyoju, hoping she would at least remain loyal to his side, but to his dismay, she suggested that since Juyeon was the one who had carried the raid, he should receive the biggest share of the loot. The leader stared at her in disbelief. Even she had been impressed by Juyeon. The other users quickly agreed with Hyoju, saying they were fine with giving everything to Juyeon. Since none of them had contributed much, they felt he had earned it. They reasoned that if Juyeon received the reward, they could consider their own share settled. Unbeknownst to any of them, a man in a black suit stood watching from a short distance away. Silently observing the raid group and the defeated leader beside Hyoju, the mysterious man reported the entire incident to his superior. He also confirmed that no boss items had dropped in the Gororim Bay field boss raid and decided to relocate to the next raid site. Meanwhile, Hyoju is blankly looking at the sky with an unreadable expression. Days later, Juyeon found himself in the field again, roasting a boar into steak using his fireball. After completing his daily quest, he received 300 SP and collapsed onto the grass, exhausted. He questioned how long it would take to get Sample to level 3, recalling that the combination of Change Resistance Grade A and Radiant Power Grade SS produced incredible buffs. The problem was, with Sample only at level 2, he lacked enough skill copies to make use of those boosts. His stats kept increasing, but he still had very few skills he could actually use. Staring at the steep cost, 4,000 SP, he concluded that leveling Sample to 3 was the only viable solution. Frustrated, he waved his arms and legs like a child, shouting that he needed SP. He grumbled that earning SP from daily quests was painfully slow. It just trickled in. He then went quiet, deep in thought, and jokingly wondered if some administrator might give him a decent quest. But no answer came, and he scoffed at himself for even entertaining the idea. Surely something like that would never happen. Then, to his shock, a swarm of panels appeared in front of him. He sat up stunned and wondered if this was the answer to his request. The system displayed a new tutorial quest, a main quest with a reward of 4,000 SP. He tried to read more, but before he could finish processing it, a deafening noise echoed through the air. Something massive began to materialize above him, visible to others in the city as well. Everyone looked up in stunned silence as a colossal pillar formed in the sky. The system identified it as F-Rank Special Field, Sky Island Canal, with an entry level of 1 to 39. The system confirmed that it was tied to his main quest, which required him to clear the special field. The rewards were significant: 10,000 SP, 1 sub-trait upgrade selection ticket, and a random skill master reward box. It also issued a warning: Sky Island Canal was strictly monster territory. As more special fields emerged, the conversion of Earth into a field world would accelerate. The system stressed the urgency of the mission. Clearing the special field was vital for the survival of Earth and humanity. Just a day later, a news reporter informed the public that a massive F-class special field named Sky Island Canal had appeared over Seoul and Gyeonggi Province. The reporter added that the visible pillars of light were presumed to be portals leading to the island, and that the user association was currently operating under emergency protocols. Due to the island's sudden emergence, flights at both Incheon and Gimpo airports had been indefinitely suspended. Citizens residing within the field's influence zone were also beginning to report issues with insufficient sunlight. The broadcast then featured an interview with a man named Kim First, a C-class user, who stated that the field's entry level was set between levels 1 and 39. He voiced the opinion that the user association should expedite the portal access authorization process. 3 days later, the reporter returned with breaking news. Special fields had begun to appear simultaneously in various locations around the world. In one shocking development, a landmass half the size of South Korea had attached itself next to Tokyo overnight. Juyeon watched the news unfold on social media. Nearby, he overheard one man telling his friend that Japan's special field wasn't a sky island, so at least they didn't have to worry about losing sunlight. Others were murmuring about a B-class special field and level 70 monsters crossing over into Tokyo. He saw videos spreading panic, with some declaring it the beginning of the end of humanity. An unprecedented evacuation order had just been issued for Tokyo. Putting his phone back into his pocket, Juyeon waited for the traffic light to change. When it turned green, he crossed carefully. On the other side of the street, he passed a man shouting that the situation in other countries proved that special fields were entirely disadvantageous. The man added that their own user association was receiving active support from the government to conduct raids quickly. After enough information was gathered, they intended to devise strategies to clear Sky Island Canal, possibly by offering a bounty. Juyeon simply walked past, stopping in front of the user shop with a sigh, thinking that the world had turned into a complete mess. He waited there, staring at the quest panels, wondering if he could somehow receive an SP advance. He checked his upcoming quests and their respective rewards, calculating precisely how much SP he would have. He confirmed that it would be just enough to raise all of his detailed traits by 1 level. Swearing to himself, he promised that he absolutely had to clear the special field. Soon after, the sales lady arrived and thanked him for waiting. She handed over the item he had ordered. Upon opening it, he was amazed. The purchase, worth 70 million won, included a cursed mana ring, grade E, which increased his mana by 100 but decreased his strength by 1, and a cursed mana bracelet, grade E, which also increased his mana by 100 while decreasing his agility by 1. When worn together as a set, they added 200 mana in total, but decreased his stamina by 2. The saleslady asked if she was correct in assuming he had been looking for those specific items. He confirmed it, accepting them with satisfaction. With the set bonus, his total mana would now reach 1,510. Even though some of his stats would decrease temporarily, he considered a full focus on magic to be the safer path for now. Curious, he asked how much it would cost to buy armor as well. The saleslady explained that a D to C class armor set would cost approximately 400 million won. She politely asked if he would like to purchase it too. Juyeon nodded at first, but then awkwardly replied that he would just take the accessories for now. Embarrassed, he quickly walked away while covering his face, internally groaning at how expensive it was to wear a whole house just to go fight. Still, the saleslady respectfully escorted him out and thanked him sincerely for his patronage. The next day, Juyeon arrived at the entrance to the special field. Instead of upgrading gear, he had spent his remaining money on a body cam, deciding that glasses were too cumbersome. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been ripped off and wondered if he should have just bought it from the beginning. Before entering the special field, he pulled out his phone to check community reviews. Scrolling through the forums, he read several alarming comments. One mentioned that the attack power of the monsters inside was insane compared to the designated field level. A high-level user he knew had been completely wiped out and forced to retreat. One user, named Out of the Bed is Dangerous, a C-class user, warned melee users to stay away. The comment explained that the field was called Sky Island for a reason. Half the monsters were airborne. Even ranged attackers were struggling, as tanks couldn't properly aggro the flying enemies. Another comment noted that perhaps because the island floated so high in the sky, the oxygen density was lower, leaving users winded from just a little running. Reading all this, Juyeon considered that based on reactions, this didn't feel like an F-class field at all, more like a D-class. Still, he dismissed the comments, reasoning that people who failed and ran away often exaggerated. He told himself not to be swayed by their negativity. He shouldn't have read the comments in the first place. Upon entering the portal, he was startled to find himself suddenly falling, something he figured he probably deserved for ignoring the warnings. Fortunately, he landed safely on soft grass, surrounded by cute slimes. The environment amazed him. The sky was clear, the setting vibrant, and the slimes didn't attack immediately. It felt peaceful, and for a moment he considered sitting down to enjoy a packed lunch. Just as he started thinking the place wasn't so bad, a scream shattered the calm. He looked up and saw a shadow blocking the sun. High above, an enormous eagle was carrying a man in its talons. The man was crying and begging for help, but the eagle soon let go. Juyeon watched in horror as the man fell to his death. More eagles circled overhead. Juyeon instinctively prepared himself, casting a fireball immediately. Knowing he only had fireballs to rely on, he glared at the sky and mentally swore that if they came for him, he'd roast every last one of them. But then the eagles flew past him. Confused, he turned to see where they were going and spotted Hyeji and her brother under attack. The eagles launched themselves toward them, stabbing at the brother's shield with sharp claws. However, the shield held strong, bouncing the birds back, though the eagles refused to retreat. Hyeji raised her staff, summoned her flame, and unleashed Firestorm, engulfing the enemies in intense magical fire. Juyeon was stunned by her power. He had expected her to be strong, but not to that extent. Her magic damage was formidable. After the fight, Hyeji stretched her arms, casually commenting to her brother that it hadn't been as difficult as she thought. Her brother agreed, but reminded her not to let her guard down and risk getting hurt like last time. At the same time, Juyeon was considering whether he should copy Hyeji's skill as well. So far, he'd only copied Fireball. As he pondered this, one of the slimes quietly approached from behind and began to mount his leg. Hyeji, meanwhile, brought up the incident again, telling her brother that if they'd had a healer back then, she wouldn't have gotten injured so badly. The more she thought about it, the more she regretted not recruiting Juyeon when they had the chance. She admitted that hunting would be much easier if he were with them now. Just then, her attention was caught by Juyeon's panicked voice. He was stuttering and pleading with the slime to get off his leg. He abruptly stopped when he noticed Hyeji and her brother watching him struggle as he shook the slime off. Hyeji remarked that it was a pleasant surprise to see him there and noted that he seemed a little busy. Juyeon gave an awkward laugh and silently cursed himself in embarrassment. The slime cried out as the man pried it off Juyeon's leg. Juyeon too had tears in his eyes. Not for the slime, but for his expensive shoes and the money he had sacrificed for them. He thanked the man for his help while quietly mourning the damage. The man tossed the slime aside, and then recognized Juyeon as the healer he had previously met in the park. Glancing back at Hyeji, he assumed she wouldn't go out of her way to add Juyeon to their party. But then he saw her smiling brightly. So brightly that he was certain she absolutely would. Hyeji approached Juyeon and casually remarked that they kept running into each other. Without hesitation, she latched onto his arm and cheerfully said it felt like fate was nudging them to team up. Juyeon, however, remained silent. He had come to hunt solo that day. Attempting to maintain some distance, he asked her if she could let go of his arm. Surprised by the request, Hyeji didn't let go. Instead, she began swinging his arm playfully up and down, assuring him that she would carry him through the hunt today. Juyeon sighed, realizing he had no choice. He decided that if this was happening, he should at least copy Light of Healing as his final skill. He agreed to party up, but explained that he needed to step away briefly, offering the excuse that he needed to find a restroom. His words confused the siblings, who asked where he expected to find a restroom in the middle of nowhere. Juyeon realized the awkwardness of the situation. Since he needed to watch a UserTube video to copy the skill, he couldn't exactly explain the truth. Instead, he doubled down, saying it was a very urgent bathroom situation. As he walked off, he silently admitted that he was already starting off by completely ruining his image. Before long, a group of eagles swooped in, clutching a massive rock. They flew directly toward the group, dropping the rock overhead. Fortunately, Hyeji's brother, being a strong tank, was able to block the impact with his shield. Juyeon noted that the eagles seemed to be using strategy now, likely because they knew they would be roasted if they got too close. He mused that they were smarter than he'd expected. But before he could reflect further, a pack of double-horned rhinos charged at them. As the double-horned rhino approached, Hyeji leapt in front of him. She gave him a quick wink before springing into action. She summoned a firewall to block the monster's approach, followed by fire rain to incinerate the eagles above, and fire spear to impale the double-horned rhino on the ground. All three spells were cast simultaneously, eradicating every enemy in their vicinity with ease. Once the battle was over, she cheerfully informed the others that the area was clear. Her brother, however, reminded her that he had told her not to charge in recklessly. She brushed off the warning, simply replying that since they had dealt with the enemies, everything was fine. Juyeon stood in silence, realizing that there was no room left for him to shine here. He complimented her performance, asking if S-Class users usually had that many skills. He then wondered aloud how many skills an EX-Class user would have if even S-Class could do so much. Hyeji confirmed that most S-Class users indeed possessed a wide arsenal of skills, explaining that the majority were learned by purchasing skill books. That insight hit him. This was all about money. They continued deeper into the field and eventually reached the ocean. There they encountered a two-mouthed crocodile monster. The siblings coordinated smoothly to block its attacks while Juyeon remained behind, quietly raising his hand. He cast a fireball at the creature, and to the siblings' astonishment, it wasn't the usual basketball-sized sphere. His fireball was the size of an entire court, engulfing the crocodile in flames and instantly searing it. Juyeon stood in shock, watching his fireball explode with far greater intensity than expected. He hadn't anticipated such a massive display of power. Hyeji, equally surprised, asked if his magic power was actually higher than hers, and questioned whether he was truly a healer. He responded nonchalantly, saying it was normal, though internally he realized that one of his random unique traits must have activated, significantly amplifying the spell's size. Unfortunately, he also noticed that the increased mana consumption outweighed the damage boost, making the cure worse than the disease. Still, he justified himself by thinking that even though healers were treated like nobles in most raid parties, having strong defensive skills was essential for leveling efficiently. Bro really can't make up a lie. Hyeji pressed further, demanding to know how much mana he had. He simply replied that it was a decent amount, careful not to reveal the truth, which was that he still had 1,408 mana remaining. He reminded himself that while there was no downside to having high mana, he was supposed to be the party's healer, not a mage, and would need to be cautious moving forward. Then he noticed Hyeji's brother was clearly not buying the lie. Juyeon also became aware of the other users nearby and realized that he needed to be much more discreet with his skill usage. A short while later, other users were idly killing the harmless-looking slimes in the area. One of them groaned, asking how much longer they had to keep doing such monotonous tasks. Another advised him not to let his guard down and to keep watch for airborne monsters. The first man responded sarcastically, claiming he was keeping an eye out, though clearly unimpressed. He grumbled that coming all the way to Sky Island just to chip away at weaklings was an insult to his pride. A nearby woman jokingly suggested he go fight one of the big ones and die like the others had. Suddenly, the system issued a field-wide notification. The number of deceased life forms on Sky Island had met the conditions for summoning the boss. The men, seemingly unfazed, assumed it would be an easy fight and planned to finish quickly so they could leave. Moments later, another message appeared. The Lord of Sky Island awakens. A figure materialized in the sky, and the users squinted upward, trying to identify it. At first it seemed like there were multiple figures, but they quickly realized it was only one. An angelic-looking man with massive wings. Golden chains began to unravel around him as the boss activated a skill. Sword of the Heavens, Grade SS. The system explained the skill's terrifying effects. One sword would be summoned for every life form that had died on Sky Island. Each sword increased the total damage by 1%. If the caster possessed the unique trait Sky Island, the number of summoned swords would double. Additionally, if the Sky Island trait was active, all swords would gain the condemnation effect, Grade E. Despite its power, the skill required only 60 mana and did not drain additional resources. Juyeon froze, stunned by the overwhelming nature of the skill. Quickly regaining focus, he shouted to warn the others that the attack was area-wide. The sky darkened as the swords rained down. Hyeji's brother managed to raise his shield just in time, bracing himself to protect them from certain death. The others, however, were not as fortunate. Each one was pierced by swords in different parts of their bodies, unable to dodge or defend in time. After the onslaught, Hyeji's brother could no longer stand. Hyeji knelt beside him, clearly alarmed. He explained that blocking the swords had inflicted a debilitating debuff. His health, attack, defense, and all stats had been significantly reduced. Juyeon stepped in and used Light of Healing on him, restoring some of his strength. He informed them that the debuff appeared to last about 10 minutes. Peeking back toward the airborne boss, he confirmed the identity. It was Canal, level 57, and its unique trait was Sky Island Grade A. It also had Sword of the Heavens, Grade S, Medium Speed Enhancement, Grade A, and Descent, Grade A. The boss's stats were exceptionally high. Juyeon was amazed by what he saw, but then turned to the group and asked if they should consider retreating. At that moment, the system displayed a new subquest. Grade B. Eliminate Kainel, the invader of Earth, and destroy the special field. The reward for defeating this special field boss included 5,000 SP and one of Kainel's skills. The next day, Juyeon was deeply immersed in researching Kanal on social media. Almost all the user reports described failure. Kanal would release blades in every direction and then vanish, leaving many to comment that the field should be called Sky Graveyard, not Sky Island. He came across a new video posted to a free board and decided to watch it. The footage showed Kanal reappearing in the sky, raising his hand as one of his white wings slowly darkened to black. Once the transformation was complete, Kanal summoned a downpour. At first, the users panicked, fearing another sword barrage, but when the water hit them, they relaxed, only to realize too late that their weapons had become heavy and their stats were falling rapidly. The rain wasn't ordinary, it was a hidden debuff. Soon after, the slimes nearby began trembling. Dark energy began to leak from their bodies. The users sensed something was wrong. Then, without warning, the slimes' bodies cracked open and monstrous insects erupted from within, charging at the users and tearing them apart. Juyeon stared at the video in horror, unable to believe that Kanal not only possessed overwhelming attack skills, but also the ability to strengthen nearby monsters. He was relieved that his group had retreated when they did. If this were just a game, spare lives might have softened the impact, but this was reality. Beyond SP, he now understood he also needed to raise his physical stats. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden ringing of his phone. The loud sound startled him, and when he checked the screen, he saw Hyeji's name, though he couldn't recall when he'd saved her number. He answered, and Hyeji introduced herself, just to confirm it was him. She asked if he had returned to Sky Island since their last party play. He told her no, and explained that while he had planned to go back, he was still struggling to grasp the boss's patterns. He added that there were now reports of Sky Island monsters descending into Seoul, similar to what had happened in Japan. Hyeji responded that the time to act had come. She informed him that a large-scale Kinal raid team had been formed and asked if he would like to join them. The announcement stunned him. A few days later, users had gathered in the D-Class swamp field at Seoul Grand Park. Among them were notable A-Class and B-Class users. Footage of the event was already circulating on UserTube. Off to the side, two F-rank users whispered among themselves. One of them asked why such high-ranking players were in a D-Class field. His friend replied that the gathering was for a preliminary meeting of the Kinal raid team. The D-Class field was just a warm-up. The first man expressed jealousy, wondering what kind of user could qualify to participate in such an elite group. Juyeon stood nearby, trembling with a mix of anxiety and embarrassment. He questioned whether he even belonged there. He awkwardly looked down at his clothes, thinking it was at least a smart move to wear something different than what he had worn as a mage. Suddenly, a cheerful voice called out his name. When he turned, he saw Hyeji and her brother. Seeing someone familiar immediately put him at ease, and he hurried over to greet them. He quietly asked if it was really okay for an F-class like him to be present when the minimum requirement was B-class. He remembered that he had registered with the User Association as an F-class healer to hide his real identity. Hyeji simply pointed out that no F-class healer used a C-class healing skill. She also noted that debuff removal was essential for this raid, so the team was accepting participants without strict conditions. She then remarked that it was about time for the raid leader to arrive. Moments later, they heard footsteps approaching at a steady pace. The entire field fell silent as a man walked into view. The users stared in awe. Hyeji, grinning, introduced the newcomer as the raid leader of the Kinal Conquest team and the SS-class warrior of the Rank 1 Guild Daehan, Lee Haesung. Haesung addressed the group, stating that before beginning the briefing for the Kinal raid, it was important to assess the individual capabilities of the raid members. He suggested starting with a warm-up and then turned to lead the way into the field. Hyeji beamed and remarked that the instructions were clear and concise. She asked if they were ready to get some revenge for what happened last time. Juyeon was struck by how no one questioned Hyeseung's blunt and somewhat rude tone. For him, though, it didn't feel rude. It was undeniably cool. A crazy kind of cool. Soon after, inside the D-class field, lizard monsters charged toward them. Hyeseung swung his massive sword with ease, cutting them down effortlessly. Juyeon stared in admiration, thinking again how cool the man was. But he snapped back to reality when he realized that wielding a sword with his stats would be suicidal. With such low base stats, he was surviving largely thanks to the elemental ring. The magic route was clearly the safer choice. Still, there was something oddly familiar about holding a sword, even though he had no memories of ever doing so. He refocused on his role, healing injured users as they fought. He reminded himself that close-quarters combat was too dangerous for now, and that ranged magic was his safest option, at least until he found a way to raise his physical stats. And yet, his inner warrior teased him, asking if he really believed that. As Hyeseung fought at the front lines, a strong surge of magical presence filled the air, yet it wasn't coming from Hyeseung. Juyeon felt it inside himself. His inner warrior urged him not to waste his abilities in hiding. As they continued practicing, he saw what he was looking for. The Bloodstained Battle, Grade SS. The description explained that the skill was activated by drinking in the blood of defeated monsters. It absorbed the target's stats temporarily, though the effect disappeared 5 minutes after combat ended. If the user possessed an S-class or higher combat-type unique trait, additional stats would be absorbed after the blood of 10 monsters was taken. Furthermore, if the user's strength reached 50 or higher, their magic power would increase by 10% of their strength. Juyeon grinned. He had just discovered a ridiculously powerful skill that could instantly raise his physical stats. Just a few minutes later, the field was littered with the corpses of defeated lizard monsters. But then, something began to stir beneath the lake. Without warning, a massive creature erupted from the water, the field boss of Seoul Grand Park's marshland, the Poison Lizard King. At the sight of the boss, the users immediately moved into position, preparing for battle. But before they could even launch an attack, Hyesung activated two powerful skills. First was Bloodstained Battle, and then Limit Break, a grade S skill that increased power attack by 1 rank for 60 seconds and boosted all stats by 5 if the user possessed an S rank or higher combat type unique trait. It required 580 mana and a minimum of 20 magic power. The Lizard King charged straight toward him, but just as it approached, Hyesung stepped forward, planting 1 foot firmly, and delivered a decisive slash with his sword. The strike landed before the boss could react, instantly killing the Poison Lizard King. Thanks to the kill, every user in the party received a permanent increase of 1 to their health. Juyeon's system panel updated as well, showing that Jade Beauty, grade B, had been registered in his boss skill list. Hyeji's brother stood in disbelief, stunned by how quickly the field boss had been taken down. Hyeji, with a grin, reminded him that she had nearly finished it off the last time. Her brother replied with exaggerated sarcasm, prompting her to lightly strike him with her staff in irritation. Juyeon, watching their exchange, asked Hyeji if users still received rewards even if they didn't actively hunt. She explained that, under normal circumstances, non-contributors wouldn't get any rewards. However, since Juyeon had been dispelling debuffs throughout the raid, his participation was deemed valid by the system. It finally clicked for him. This was how healers leveled up. He concluded that it was possibly the easiest job ever. Meanwhile, Hyesung calmly sheathed his sword and approached the group. Regaining his composure, he announced that he would now deliver the final briefing and organize the team before reward distribution. He began outlining the strategy. Previously, mages had been grouped together to launch simultaneous attacks. However, there was still uncertainty about whether the strengthened monsters had higher resistance to magic or physical attacks. Going forward, they would divide and deploy based on each user's primary damage type, magic or physical. But as Hyesung spoke, Juyeon found himself drifting. His attention shifted to a system panel showing a new skill. Catalyst Grade B. The skill amplified effects on poisoned enemies. When poison stacked 3 or more times, it would evolve into lethal poison. It had a mana cost of 800 and required 40 magic power. Although the boss had been defeated before Juyeon had a chance to see its skills, he figured Catalyst could still be useful in the future. He smiled to himself, not because of the poison skill, but because of the skills he just obtained. Limit Break, Grade S, and Bloodstained Battle, Grade SS. It felt like Santa Claus had arrived early, handing out SS rank skills as if they were holiday gifts. Hyesung turned toward him, addressing him as one of the raid's healers. Juyeon, still giddy with excitement, responded sweetly and eagerly, so much so that Hyesung was momentarily unsettled by the energy in his expression. But Juyeon didn't care. He had gotten everything he wanted, and all he wanted now was to go home quickly. A few days later, the long-awaited day 1 of the Kainal raid arrived. Juyeon, however, was slumped on his bed, so tired it felt like he could die. He opened his status window, groaning as he wondered how long it would take to collect everything he needed. The system displayed that he had exactly 4,000 SP. Relief washed over him. He had managed to gather everything he needed before the Kainal raid officially began. He recalled the daily quests that had occupied his time recently. Defeating 30 crustacean ministers, collecting 33 horned bullhorns, eliminating 30 ground-type monsters, and dispatching 30 monsters with fire attribute skills. All of them were grade E, and he hadn't even had time to rest. Still, he told himself that getting E-rank quests consecutively like that was unbelievably lucky. Sitting up in bed, he consoled himself and decided it was time to level up his most critical skill. If the heavens were helping, he might as well take advantage. The system asked if he wanted to level up skill copy. He immediately confirmed. The system deducted the 4,000 SP and displayed the result. Skill copy had reached level 3. Starting at midnight, he would be able to use 3 skills at the same time. Originally, his goal was to buff attack power using Brilliant Authority and Resistance to Change, then unleash burst damage. But now that red-cloaked Santa, also known as Hyesung, had given him Bloodstained Battle, Grade SS. Having only 3 skill copies wasn't enough. He then wondered whether attaching Bloodstained Battle, Brilliant Authority, and Resistance to Change together would create an additional attack synergy. He thought it would definitely generate a combo more powerful than the original setup. It would have been perfect if he could equip 4 skills. Still, for the day, he decided to copy Brilliant Authority, Fireball, and Resistance to Change, since he could only use 3 skills simultaneously. Later, in the field, he faced a massive dog monster, but he simply smiled happily as he cast Fireball, eager to test his boosted attack power. A few minutes later, on UserTube, players were buzzing about a psychopath named Juyeon, who was one-shotting everything with Fireball in an F-rank field. They speculated that Juyeon was in Gapyeong, which had become a total mess thanks to him. A new video appeared titled, Gapyeong Field, Mountain Snake Getting Utterly Destroyed by Small Attacks. In the footage, users were seen preparing to attack a massive snake monster. However, the snake crawled past all of them, ignoring their presence entirely. They quickly realized its aggro was locked on someone else. The camera followed as the snake chased a hooded man, lunging with its mouth wide open to devour him, only for the man to hurl a massive fireball at it. Viewers were stunned, asking what kind of fireball could be that huge and whether that man was the psychopath. The panic rose as Juyeon sprinted in their direction with unbelievable speed. Viewers were amazed and wondered what his agility stat must be to move like that, and questioned if he was even a mage. The snake then appeared in front of the users, ready to devour them, but a fireball was thrown just in time, knocking the snake away. They turned to see Juyeon behind the blast. But once again, Juyeon sprinted off as the snake charged at him. They watched in disbelief as he repeatedly attacked the snake with fireballs, even shouting at it to just die already. The comment left everyone feeling awkward, unable to believe that someone was actually taking down a field boss using chip damage. A crazy bastard, they thought. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a luxury black car came to a stop. Suyeon opened the door and reported that the field inspection schedule was complete. She informed Al that he had 1 hour and 24 minutes of free time until his next appointment. But Al ignored her, smiling as he watched a video of the so-called psychopath defeating the mountain snake. Suyeon asked if he was concerned about the psychopath. Al replied yes, because he was the one who had received his precious elemental ring. She commented that he seemed quite sure the psychopath was Juyeon, but Al merely asked if she didn't find it interesting. He noted that it hadn't been long since he had given Juyeon the ring, and the ring didn't affect agility or stamina. Yet Juyeon had been dodging attacks with minimal movement, as if he had long-trained combat instincts. Al stepped out of the car and asked Suyeon about the movements of the Raider Guild. She reported that, as predicted, sightings had been increasing near special fields. He then ordered her to keep a close watch on both the psychopath and the raiders, because with so much attention on Juyeon, bugs were bound to gather. Al proceeded toward the mansion, telling Suyeon that he hoped those bugs wouldn't cause trouble for his friend. Elsewhere, in an office room, a blonde man smirked horrifyingly as he watched the video of Juyeon fighting the mountain snake. He had taken a keen interest in the one known as Psychopath. The next day, in the special field, he saw a video of himself on another channel and noticed it had over 4 million views. He was furious, wondering if those people were crazy, and shouted aloud why they were the ones making money when he was the one who did all the work. He questioned whether his right of publicity was a joke, even if not a single speck of his face had been shown. He snapped, realizing that if things were going to be like this, it would be better to upload the footage himself. He shoved his phone back into his pocket and planned to get his channel verified this time and upload the bodycam footage too. He decided his first upload would be titled Level 10 Beginner Mage Soloing E-Rank Field Boss, Mountain Snake, and was certain that if he uploaded the Kainal raid footage as well, the views would skyrocket. He planned to create a separate account to avoid being identified as the same person as the psychopath, and began wondering, what if he ended up with 1 million subscribers and received a gold button? He even thought about whether he should upload a verification video. Looking around, he asked aloud how he was supposed to gather materials in the pitch-black night. His daily quest was Grade B, and it required collecting 10 essences from the special field, defeating 20 monsters, and surviving in the field for more than 60 minutes. The reward was a quest buff Grade B and a random item box. He sighed in exhaustion, thinking that only E or F rank daily quests usually appeared. Had he seen the quest earlier, he wouldn't have had to come out at night. He still couldn't believe he had slept all day after catching just one measly snake. Determined to finish before the skill reset at midnight, he pressed on. Fortunately, a blue glowing crystal appeared in front of him. He wondered if it was the special essence, picked it up, and the system confirmed that he had 1 out of 10 essences. That confirmed it didn't drop from monsters, which meant he had to search every nook and cranny while running in circles around the field. He couldn't believe he was running again, and thought that if the quest hadn't been B rank, he would have abandoned it already, completely unaware of the eagle circling above him. Suddenly, the eagle lunges at him from behind. Fortunately, he sensed it just in time and managed to dodge at high speed. He then calmly looked down at the eagle, which had crashed into the ground. A moment later, the realization sank in and he shouted, demanding to know what just happened and how he had dodged it so instinctively. He watched the eagle struggle to free its beak from the tree and realized that his body had moved before he even had time to think. He wondered if it was the combined effect of using brilliant authority and resistance to change. Raising his finger, he decided to think about it later. He then cast Fireball, roasting both the eagle and the tree. Nearby, someone saw the explosion. The man remarked to his members that quite a few users were hunting even at such late hours. He asked them about Kainal. One of the masked men replied that the advanced team had located it in the northwest. The man grinned, saying that just the thought of catching Kainal before that bastard Hyesung and watching him return empty-handed made him excited. His subordinate asked what they should do if other users barged into the raid. The man replied with a sinister smile and ordered them to kill everyone who barges in. A few hours later, Juyeon finished killing 20 monsters and was relieved to finally be done with one of his tasks. He then spotted another essence on the ground and was pleased to find that the essences were easier to locate than he had expected.
He figured he would be able to collect them all before midnight. The system then notified him that he had collected 9 out of 10 essences, which made him even happier, especially since he had already completed the requirement of surviving in the field for over an hour. Now, he needed just 1 more essence to finish the daily quest. Suddenly, he heard a loud explosion nearby. He turned around in shock and saw Kainal being attacked from the air. He scratched his head in confusion, knowing that their guild raid wasn't scheduled until early the next morning. He watched as a group of users launched arrows at Kainal, focusing their attacks on its wings. He panicked, wondering what to do. At this rate, Kainal might get taken down before his guild even arrived. He considered contacting his guild members but realized it was probably too late, given the situation. However, he calmed down when he recalled that his quest was simply to attempt conquering the F-rank special field and to defeat Kainal, the master of Sky Island. The quest hadn't specified who he had to defeat Kainal with or how much he needed to contribute. He asked himself whether he really needed to defeat Kainal personally, and within seconds, decided to just observe and hitch a free ride. One of the masked users successfully struck Kainal's black wing with an arrow, causing Kainal to fall from the air. The users shouted that this was their chance and charged at Kainal. Kainal rose in fury, but he simply watched as the system displayed a notification. If Kainal's health drops below 50%, it becomes unable to fly and will corrupt one of its wings, adding the Condemn Grade E effect to all its attacks. Kainal then corrupted another white wing and entered its third phase. It summoned a second longsword and swung both swords rapidly, sending clouds of dust sweeping across the battlefield. Juyeon shielded his eyes from the dust. Then, to his surprise, he found another essence nearby. He casually approached it, humming to himself, and remarking that today's mission really was easy money. Unaware that Kainal had just released a powerful energy surge and stabbed both swords into the ground. The resulting force rippled outward, knocking the masked users away close to his location. He looked up and saw 3 users floating in the air, wondering why they were headed his way while he was still holding the essence. The users hit the ground but quickly got up despite the pain, determined to check for other scattered members and regroup. One of the men called out to Juyeon, who had also been hit by the man, and demanded to know who he was. The man, disoriented, added that he'd lost his mind trying to find the mage. Juyeon, now holding a mask, asked the man to repeat what he said. The man shouted at him to get a grip, but Juyeon ignored him, staring at the mask in his hand, wondering what it was. The man then angrily asked what he was doing and ordered him to get over there quickly. Juyeon stammered a yes in reply, put the mask on, and shouted to the others that they should go together, thinking that as long as he didn't get caught, everything would be fine. He silently thanked the original owner of the mask, whoever they were. The system then notified him that he had collected 10 essences from the special field and completed the daily quest. His unclaimed random item had been stored in his temporary inventory, and his quest buff had been applied as a reward. A moment later, the masked users continued their assault on Kainal, with powerful blue fireballs suddenly being hurled at the boss, severely injuring it. However, the masked users began asking where those fireballs were coming from. They hadn't seen them before. He overheard them muttering that someone was going through hell up close, but someone else was just a pure damage dealer leeching from a distance, which felt like total crap. That's when it hit him. He was screwed. His firepower had gotten too strong thanks to the buffs. He knew that if he didn't use any skills, it would look suspicious. But if he did use them, he'd stand out. If they weren't in the middle of an intense fight, he would have already been caught for sure. Still, continuously pounding the sturdy punching bag that was Kainal with his current stats gave him a rush. He and the other users continued launching attacks at Kainal. He thought that since things had reached this point, he might as well blend in and rake in the rewards. The system then notified him, if Kainal does not lose more than 10% of its health during the battle, the summoning order Grade A will activate, summoning the monsters of Sky Island. Additionally, once the summoning order is activated, the subordination enhancement, Grade A effect, would be applied to those summoned monsters. Suddenly, Kainal raised one of his swords into the air and released a powerful energy. The energy spike caught the attention of eagles in the sky and even monsters far off in the distance who had been attacking other users. Those monsters abruptly stopped and began sprinting away. The users fighting them were left confused, wondering what was happening, and whether a raid had started nearby. They followed the trail of monsters and discovered the masked users engaged in combat with Kainal, but they knew full well that the announced raid wasn't supposed to happen that day. The masked leader grew frustrated seeing more and more people taking notice. When one of the ordinary users stepped forward to ask what they were doing, the masked man slashed him, and the man screamed as his blood splattered across the ground. The masked leader scowled and muttered that if Hyesung found out, things would get irritating. He then ordered his men to deal with the outsiders as well. Panic spread among the onlookers as one of the ordinary users stammered, asking what was wrong with them, but the masked men gave no response. They simply cut them down without hesitation. Juyeon watched in horror. He couldn't believe it. These people weren't just stealing the boss, they were committing player killing. He realized he needed to get out of there immediately. These lunatics would kill anyone who got in their way. Just as one of the masked men was about to slash another user, a sword intercepted the attack. Hyesung had arrived, flanked by Hyeji, her brother, and others. Hyesung glared furiously at the masked men, and Juyeon knew right then he was completely and utterly screwed. The masked leader sneered and mocked Hyesung, saying a ragtag bunch like his couldn't possibly be the real raid party. He scoffed, asking what kind of lowlifes barge into a raid and act like they own it. That only enraged Hyesung further. He shouted back that they weren't just stealing the boss, they were killing innocent users. He declared that the masked group wouldn't have a leg to stand on, even if they died right then and there. With that, Hyesung lunged at them, yelling for them to die. The masked man behind Juyeon shoved him aside, shouting for him to get out of the way. Juyeon looked at them in shock as both groups clashed violently, and he panicked, wondering what he should do and where he should hide to survive the chaos. Suddenly, Kainal continued his assault, ordering his monsters to attack everyone indiscriminately. However, the masked men were more concerned about losing the final hit on Kainal. They grumbled that it was like cooking porridge only to feed it to a dog, and continued attacking the raid members, even as the summoned monsters attacked everyone without distinguishing between parties. Juyeon realized that they needed to bring Kainal down quickly to restore order. But with the raid's firepower scattered across the chaos, their overall damage output was lacking. At that moment, Hyesung activated Bloodstained Battle and began cutting down every masked user and monster in his path. Watching him, Juyeon suddenly got an idea on how to help finish off Kainal. Meanwhile, Hyeji was fighting at the back with her fire spear, slaying monsters while her brother protected her from the front. However, she didn't notice someone sneaking up behind her. Fortunately, just as the attacker was about to stab her, a powerful blue fireball struck the man and pushed him back. She turned quickly and saw it had come from a hooded man in a mask, wielding fire magic, without realizing it was Juyeon. Her brother, alarmed, rushed over and asked if she was okay and what had happened. Hyeji replied that the masked mage had attacked his own side to save her. Her brother looked at Juyeon with suspicion, unable to believe it. A few minutes later, Juyeon was dodging attacks from both allies and enemies, careful not to retaliate. He knew they had to hold on just a bit longer. As the clock neared 11:58, he told himself to wait just a little more. He continued killing monsters with fireballs, then bolted when one of the raid members attempted to attack him. The moment the system clock struck midnight, he sighed in relief and immediately activated skill copy to duplicate Hyesung's Bloodstained Battle, which instantly increased all of his stats by 20%. Pointing forward, he launched a massively enhanced fireball, incinerating the monsters in front of Hyesung. Thanks to that, he secured 20 kills and increased his Bloodstained Battle effect by another 2%. Hyesung shot him a glare, clearly irritated, but ultimately let it slide and turned to attack monsters on the opposite side. As Juyeon fought, he realized that if the monsters kept respawning, the skill's effect would continue to stack. Since Bloodstained Battle increased stats by 2% per kill, it was even more broken than Resistance to Change, which only increased stats by a fixed value. Juyeon then launched an advanced fireball at Kainal, bidding it farewell. The blast landed successfully, triggering a massive explosion that rocked the battlefield. Moments later, the monsters had been wiped out, and Kainal was down on one knee. The raid members, seeing Kainal motionless, asked whether they could go in for the kill. But Juyeon cursed loudly as he caught sight of Kainal's red, furious eye. He knew it was entering its final phase. Kainal drew a spear and gripped its handle tightly. Then, slamming it into the ground, a powerful force erupted and spread across the entire Sky Island. Juyeon did his best to shield himself, but the energy was too overwhelming. He knew that if they couldn't endure this, they were done for. Suddenly, Hyeji's brother appeared in front of him and activated a protective barrier, shielding Juyeon from the blast. As the force shattered Juyeon's mask, he stared at him in disbelief. But Hyeji's brother simply said calmly, "He owe him one." The ground around Kainal shattered into fragments as the boss scanned its surroundings for any remaining life forms. It was startled when the sound of a barrier breaking came from above and spotted Hyeji's brother and Juyeon nearby. Juyeon raised his hand, gathering magic, and began forming a fireball. Pouring in more mana, he expanded the fireball until it was as large as a globe. Without hesitation, he hurled it in Kainal's direction. Recognizing the threat, Kainal understood that defeat was imminent. Hyesung and the others braced themselves as the fireball struck, forcing Kainal back down to its knees. A moment later, the system confirmed the boss's death with a massive drop of loot items. Among the items, a glowing necklace stood out, clearly the indicator of a boss system reward. Tension escalated as Hyesung and the masked leader exchanged glances. Hyesung issued a cold warning, advising the masked man to step aside if he didn't want to die after being saved. The masked leader, visibly annoyed, questioned whether it wasn't obvious that their mage was the true MVP. His attention locked onto Juyeon, his thoughts turning to how he could eliminate the boy and reclaim the boss system prize. At that very moment, Juyeon received a system alert notifying him that he had completed his main quest and would be transferred to the tutorial field in 10 seconds to choose his rewards. He stared blankly at the message, then glanced at the masked leader, who clearly hadn't realized the extent of Juyeon's damage potential. Leaping from a nearby cliff, Juyeon landed directly on the pile of dropped items. Both Hyesung and the masked leader were stunned by his boldness. As Hyesung rushed forward, Juyeon called out to the group, asserting that they had clearly seen him finish off Kainal. He then picked up the necklace near the boss's corpse. The masked leader seethed, finally recognizing Juyeon as the psychopath user. With a triumphant grin, Juyeon declared the necklace his and thanked them all for the raid effort. Before anyone could stop him, he disappeared, leaving both Hyesung and the masked man grasping at air. Hyesung, feeling nothing but empty air where his sword had swung, cursed in frustration, accusing the boy of playing him. The masked leader, surprisingly calm, stated that they had been tricked. When Hyesung demanded an explanation, the man merely asked what else it could be, noting that everyone there had just been outsmarted by that psychopath. Still in disbelief, the masked leader couldn't accept that the boss system had been stolen from right under him. Meanwhile, Juyeon, now floating in space, was also trying to process what had just happened, unsure if he had truly pulled off such an outrageous move. The system then issued his rewards: 10,000 SP, one selectable detailed trait upgrade, and a random skill master reward box for completing the main quest. Additionally, he received 4,000 SP and activation of the fourth subtrait of his unique trait for completing the tutorial quest. It also confirmed that he had absorbed the soul of the special field boss Kanal, classified as Grade F, which granted a stat increase of +1 across the board, and the boss skill descendant, Grade A. Juyeon, stunned, muttered to himself in disbelief, overwhelmed by the flood of system notifications. Abruptly, the notification panel slid away, revealing a small fairy who addressed him as the Brave One. Juyeon stared in shock, but the fairy introduced herself calmly as Ego, his tutorial assistant. Still confused, he asked for clarification, to which she affirmed her role. Ego explained that she had been summoned to guide him through the tutorial process. Juyeon remained baffled, having never heard of a tutorial assistant before and unable to recall seeing any mention of one online. He speculated that perhaps it was a feature exclusive to EX-grade unique traits. Ego then suggested they proceed with reward collection, and Juyeon, regaining his composure, agreed and thanked her. She twirled her hand in the air, and the system displayed the interface for choosing a detailed trait upgrade. Ego explained that trait upgrades functioned similarly to a second-class advancement, essentially adding detailed traits to existing ones. However, the explanation only left him more confused. She clarified further that he could select one of his current abilities and upgrade its detailed traits. She then displayed his skill master and skill copy traits in greater detail, asking which one he would prefer to enhance. He considered his options carefully. Upgrading income would increase the SP gained from his attacks, which would be beneficial in the long run. But he knew he was currently too weak. If the raid against Kanal had taken place before midnight, before his skills reset, he would have stood no chance of defeating it. He concluded that increasing the number of available skill copies was the smarter move. He informed Ego that he would select sample for skill copy, and she confirmed his choice by applying the detailed trait upgrade. As a result, he would now gain 2 charges for copied skills at midnight and 12 p.m. Additionally, when using skill copy, there would be a chance to either recharge 1 copy or upgrade the last copied skill by 1 grade. He was amazed at the result, though slightly disappointed that the charge was reduced to 2. Still, with 4 copies a day, it was more than manageable. He then realized that with some luck, he might even reach up to 8 copies per day. Ego asked if he would like to check his other unclaimed rewards, to which he immediately agreed. She opened his random item box and drew out a fire explosion sword, Grade C. The weapon provided an additional +7 strength, +3 magic, and increased fire attribute mana infusion and skill power by 7%. He stared at the sword, reflecting on how everything seemed to revolve around fire attributes, even this reward. Ego then handed him a chest, his Skillmaster reward box, Grade C, from the main quest. Upon opening it, he received a bonus quest, Grade C. The objectives were to defeat 2 field bosses, eliminate 100 monsters, and spend 5,000 SP. The reward included 10,000 SP and +3 intelligence stat points, Grade D. He questioned whether it was truly an item, since it felt more like a quest, but decided it was an excellent deal considering the SP return. Next, Ego proceeded to apply the new subtrait reward, and he received the 4th subtrait of his unique trait. It granted a random option, Grade F, to any copied skill. He interpreted it as an extra attribute added to copied abilities and considered it a decent addition. He then raised Kanel's cursed necklace and told Ego that what he had truly been looking forward to was this item. The cursed necklace, Grade SS, provided a boost of +33 magic, +333 mana, 13% increased mana recovery, 13% increased skill power, and a 10% reduction in skill mana cost. Additionally, if his health dropped below 20%, mana recovery would increase by 200%, magic would increase by 33%, and all stats would receive a +5 boost while the necklace was equipped. He shouted in amazement at the sheer power of the stat bonuses and asked about the boss skill. If the boss system item was this strong, he wondered what kind of ability the boss skill held. The system then revealed Kanal's descendant, Grade A. When health fell below 10%, the user would enter a descent state, increasing all stats by 50% of their magic stat. All attacks would gain the Corruption, Grade C effect, and both health and mana would be restored. The descent would last 10 minutes and had a cooldown of 30 days. Reading this, he was left speechless. He realized that Kanal had essentially been a being of light, and he suspected that this might have been the final phase skill he had witnessed earlier. He was both irritated and relieved. If he hadn't defeated Kanal with Ultra Burst DPS during Bloodstained battle, he would never have stood a chance against its post-descent form. He felt dizzy at the realization and reminded himself that this was effectively a reserve life with a 30-day cooldown. With 20,000 SP at his disposal, he decided to invest 15,000 SP into skill copy, increasing his sample level by 4. This upgrade allowed him to charge 3 skill copies at both midnight and noon, with continued chances to recharge one or upgrade a copied skill by 1 grade. Satisfied with this foundational enhancement, he moved on. He then spent 800 SP to upgrade efficiency, which reduced the mana cost of copied skills by 20%. He declared this as an investment in practical performance. Next, he invested 2,000 SP into the Blessing trait, which added 1 random unique trait, grade E, to each copied skill, enhancing overall robustness. Finally, he allocated 3,000 SP to improve his daily quest, which guaranteed quests of at least grade E every midnight. Energized by this investment in consistent growth, he celebrated his decisions, while Ego cheered in admiration. Moments later, he collapsed onto the floor of the spatial field in exhaustion, feeling satisfied that everything was finally settled. He asked Ego if there was anything left to do, expecting it to be the end. However, she told him that everything so far had simply been about claiming rewards. He stared at her in confusion. She calmly explained that what came next was the true start of the tutorial. Still unsure, he asked what she meant. She then asked if he remembered the final sentence of his main quest. Thinking for a moment, he recalled that it mentioned the survival of Earth and humanity. Sitting up abruptly, he asked what that meant. Ego responded with a chilling truth. This world was about to be destroyed by invaders from another dimension. The next day, a news reporter announced that Sky Island had naturally disappeared following the defeat of its boss, and the citizens in the affected area had once again reclaimed clear skies. She further reported that the gate connecting to Sky Island had vanished. However, a new spatial distortion phenomenon was now occurring, and experts could not rule out the possibility of the field mutating again. Hyesung addressed the media, acknowledging that while the incident may have already been leaked through video, their raid had suffered major setbacks due to a group that maliciously stole the boss. Despite that, the Kinal raid had been successfully completed. Immediately after the boss's defeat, the unidentified individuals had fled the scene. When asked by one of the reporters what the reward for defeating the special field boss had been, Hyesung stated that an increase in all stats was confirmed. Another reporter then asked if any boss items had dropped, a question that clearly agitated Hyesung. Without further comment, he turned away and told the press that he had nothing more to say. Elsewhere, Hyeji turned off the television and sighed in frustration. Her brother remarked that if the psychopath user were ever caught by Hyesung, the consequences might be deadly. Hyeji ignored him and attempted to call someone, but the call failed to connect. Her brother asked if she was still trying to reach that person and questioned whether her suspicion might be wrong. She replied that they should assume the robe was standard wizard equipment, but if the psychopath user's primary attack was fireball, then it changed everything. She called Juyeon again and grew visibly excited when he finally answered. Upon hearing his voice, she immediately got to the point and asked if he was the wizard who had helped during the Kinal raid. Shocked by the question, Juyeon nervously asked what she was talking about. Although he hadn't even set foot near the raid site, she explained that she had noticed the magic gear he was wearing closely resembled that of the psychopath. She had tried to approach him during the raid, but he disappeared before she had the chance. Worried, he insisted that he hadn't even gone near the raid and firmly denied being the psychopath. He expressed regret at not being able to join despite being invited. Then, citing that he was taking a shower, he told her he had to end the call and remarked that since the call couldn't come through the shower, it would be better to leave it there. Her reaction made it clear that she had already figured out he was acting suspiciously. Meanwhile, in a luxury hotel, Juyeon was relaxing in a bathtub, thinking she probably wouldn't call back now that he had answered. He checked the call history from Hyeji, wondering who had the stamina to keep calling once a minute. He hadn't wanted to answer earlier because he was already overwhelmed by everything, especially the disturbing reminder from Ego that the world was about to be invaded by entities from another dimension. Ego, however, had reassured him not to worry. She had reminded him that he possessed a special power, Skill Master. She explained that this power was a subordinate authority of reality-altering abilities granted only to divine beings. It was in essence a divine gift uniquely meant for him. Still skeptical, he questioned why he had such a power and whether he was supposed to be some kind of god or chosen one. It didn't sit right with him, especially since he had always lived a disciplined and honest life, including his time in the military. Ego admitted that the situation was indeed confusing, but told him not to overthink it. She pointed out that he had already achieved many things and had received numerous rewards for them. However, she added that now there was only one final choice left to make. When he asked what choice that was, Ego explained that the power he currently wielded was not yet the full strength of the divine shards. A true hero is someone burdened with the power to save the world. That power could either remain dormant or flourish, depending entirely on the choice he made. She then posed a pivotal question, whether he would be content with simply surviving and enjoying the weight of his power, or whether he would choose to rise up, bear the burden, and save the world himself. Unable to respond immediately, he remained silent. Ego then reassured him that salvation was not necessarily the hero's duty. It was merely one of many options available to him, as it had always been. Back in the present, he still couldn't believe that someone like him, who had been nothing more than a lazy bum until recently, was now contemplating salvation. He decided to forget about it for the time being, and instead planned to eat fried chicken and drink beer after finishing his bath. Meanwhile, at Hyeji's house, she lay sprawled on the sofa, feeling pleased with the work she had just completed. She reasoned that Juyeon definitely had psychopath tendencies based on her sharp intuition and genius-level analytical skills. However, she still lacked concrete proof, so no matter how much she speculated, she would need to meet Juyeon face-to-face to confirm it. Her brother noticed her deep calculation and asked why she was so obsessed with Juyeon. She ignored him and continued her investigation, prompting him to remind her that even S-rank users could die in field zones at any moment. She responded that if she was going to die anyway, then she at least wanted to be the best in that field. To achieve that, she would need someone exceptional, like a psychopath, in her party. Her brother sighed hopelessly and remarked that if she truly wanted to be the best, she should stop acting so recklessly all the time. She nodded, thinking fast. Juyeon caused trouble on Sky Island, then slipped away without a trace, careful to stay out of sight. She guessed he was under level 40, so he would skip busy places and look for a quiet D-grade field far from Seoul. Low on cash and without a car, he likely moved by bus or on foot. With all those deductions, she proudly told her brother that if she narrowed the range accordingly, she expected Juyeon would soon appear at a D-grade spider cave near the metropolitan area. Her brother, however, didn't share her enthusiasm. After her lengthy explanation, he simply asked if she was being dumb and pointed out that things never went as smoothly as she imagined. Unfortunately for him, a few days later, they actually encountered Juyeon at the D-grade spider cave. Hyeji's brother stared at him in disbelief, unable to process that he had truly shown up. Juyeon insisted that he wasn't really hunting and claimed he had only come to look for healing items, but Hyeji responded cheerfully, saying she already knew the truth and told him to stop pretending. She then asked what he was hiding. Juyeon firmly replied that he was just a regular healer, but she pressed him again, questioning whether he was seriously going to continue the act. Juyeon, clearly frustrated, asked why she was acting that way toward him. Meanwhile, Hyeji's brother watched the exchange with mild disdain, thinking it was pathetic that a citizen was getting played by a punk. Tired of the back and forth, Hyeji's brother raised 5 fingers and told Juyeon he'd pay him 500 won per hour, suggesting they just get moving. He placed a hand on Juyeon's shoulder, thinking it was pointless to waste time trying to convince Hyeji to change her mind. As Juyeon was about to object, the brother reminded him that they had agreed he'd pay off his debt. Juyeon looked at him in disbelief, pushed the man's hand off his shoulder, and sighed in frustration. Reluctantly, he agreed to go along with them, admitting that he didn't really understand what all this talk of light meant. But he was going because they were offering 500 won. Hyeji, thrilled by his response, said they should head straight to the field. Juyeon stopped them and said to wait a moment. When Hyeji asked what it was this time, he explained that he needed to use the bathroom. Hyeji smiled knowingly, while her brother silently recalled her deduction about Juyeon possibly having irritable bowel syndrome. He began to wonder if she had just confirmed it. Meanwhile, Juyeon felt deeply embarrassed, guessing that they had now branded him as some kind of poop freak, completely unaware that, in reality, they had already labeled him as the psychopath. A moment later, Hyeji continued to press him, asking again whether he was the mage who had scampered off after helping in the Kinal raid, and if he was, in fact, the psychopath. She smiled brightly at him, but he feigned confusion, asking her to repeat what she had said as though he hadn't heard it clearly. Her expression shifted into frustration, annoyed that he was still being so evasive. They were nearing the entrance to the spider cave, yet Hyeji wouldn't let up. She insisted that if he truly was the psychopath, she wanted to repay him for his help. Since they worked in the same industry, she promised to keep his identity a secret no matter what. He wiped the sweat from his face, uneasy, but began piecing things together. Based on what they were saying, it seemed obvious now that they were convinced the scammer mage was him. He recalled Hyeji's brother mentioning that they had agreed to repay him, and it confirmed that there was no use denying it any longer. Admitting defeat, he confessed that the psychopath and the crazy mage were both him, but he urged them not to tell anyone. Hyeji was astonished but quickly connected the dots. That explained why his magic output seemed greater than hers. He clarified that the difference came down to gear bonuses, stressing that equipment was the key. She agreed and asked him what skill books he used for buffs or healing, considering he was a mage. Before he could answer, her brother stopped walking and reminded her that they were in a fairly high-level D-grade field with a lot of monsters. He asked if she wasn't tired of messing around, and her reluctant agreement seemed to ease her brother's concerns. He then said that since they had earned their 500 won, he would go ahead and clear the path. Drawing his fire flame sword, he prepared for combat. Hyeji was surprised to see he used a magic sword, something she hadn't known about. He simply explained that he couldn't afford a staff, so he had settled for a sword instead. He considered that due to his magic power stat, the sword was better than nothing. Since he was already equipped, he decided it was a good chance to test out his skills. To Hyeji's confusion, the sword emitted ice instead of fire. Remaining silent, he activated Ice Spear, grade E, which summoned a spear made of ice capable of attacking enemies within a 20-meter radius. He appreciated that being a skill master gave him the advantage of using various types of skills and combining them freely. He then layered a poison, grade D effect, onto the ice spear, which would inflict poison on any struck targets. He launched the spears at the spiders blocking the path, intending to poison them to death. After confirming the spears had pierced the targets, he clenched his fist tightly and activated Catalyst, which amplified the effects on poisoned enemies. When the poison stacks exceeded 3, it transformed into critical poison. They all watched as the spiders' insides exploded from the reaction, killing them instantly. He acknowledged once again that magic wasn't bad at all, but if he were spotted using such flashy attacks, he'd be in trouble. That made him conclude that he should avoid using Fireball for a while. Hyeji, who hadn't expected him to have different magic affinities, asked if he wasn't actually a flame mage. He didn't respond, having realized that Fireball's damage now felt lacking compared to the other magic he had tried. Hyeji stared at him in growing confusion, beginning to wonder what he truly was. Later that day, at a Sampyeongsal restaurant, Hyeji chatted happily while drinking beer. They raised their glasses to toast, but he kept his gaze low, planning to sneak off right after the meal. A short while earlier, he had killed the queen spider, grade D boss, and absorbed its soul. He was pleased with the one-shot kill and the successful skill test and had been ready to head home, until he was startled by Hyeji's loud scream. Hyeji and her brother had just discovered they couldn't acquire the boss's soul due to insufficient contribution. She commented that although she had earned the 501, all she had done was provide minor support. And now the soul had gone entirely to him. Frustrated yet amazed, she said she might as well buy him a sip of wine to make up for it. He quickly agreed out of fear and offered that they should eat some meat instead. It finally sank in that this was a party hunt, not a solo run, and that maybe disappearing right away wasn't such a smooth move after all. Back in the present, he took a sip of his beer and figured he might as well relax and enjoy the drink. But just then, Hyeji slammed her beer glass on the table and called out to him loudly. She announced that she had a proposal that would turn him into bones and flesh, leaving him with the sudden realization that things were about to get messy. She explained that in the field, monsters weren't the only danger. Conflicts with other players often broke out, as seen during the final raid. Some people believed that getting stronger would naturally resolve everything, but the truth was that players didn't hunt boss monsters alone. Even if the enemies were humans instead of monsters, the risk and difficulty remained the same. The weight of her words made him tremble slightly as he understood what she was getting at. Remaining composed, she emphasized that there was no point in hunting alone. It was far too dangerous. She questioned how exhausting it must be to deal with high-level fields without a tank, a proper schedule, or even the hassle of managing taxes from item sales. She then handed him a joint contract, offering to handle everything on his behalf so that he could focus entirely on hunting. He asked if she was serious about signing a contract with him, and she confirmed it. She explained that there weren't many reliable users in the field hunting industry, but he was strong, and they shared a secret. Monsters left behind items when they died, and people left behind their names. If one couldn't become the best alone, then rising to the top with the help of others was the next best path. She added that she hated being a side character more than dying itself. Holding the contract closer to his face, she promised that signing it would grant him access to a free office tel exclusively for users, with the world's most beautiful woman living next door. Her brother, watching the exchange, thought Hyeji was trying a bit too hard. When he asked who is the most beautiful woman, Hyeji proudly and confidently pointed at herself. Both he and her brother were left speechless. Choosing to pretend he hadn't seen it, he commented that the contract conditions were too good to refuse. Hyeji, overjoyed, said they should sign it immediately and celebrated loudly, much to her brother's embarrassment. He told her to sit down and eat. A few hours later, the contract was officially signed. Hyeji explained that the field schedule would prioritize his preferences, and she would manage everything outside of combat, including his daily routine. She handed him a black card and told him to buy whatever he needed. She would handle all the money he earned from field hunts. He accepted the card as she added that if he needed anything clarified, he should just let her know anytime. He looked around, thinking how unbelievable the whole situation was, but replied that her explanation had been perfectly clear. Internally, he was thrilled. It was awesome. He was now living in a penthouse. The contract was a dream for Juyeon. Hunting had never felt easier. More than that, despite trying to avoid unnecessary attachments because of the circumstances, he couldn't help but admit that Hyeji was undeniably attractive. For someone like her to voluntarily become his manager made him feel like even Muhammad Ali had nothing on him. And ever since acquiring Catalyst, everything had been going smoothly. A few days later, the system notified him that his copied Blood Combat, grade SS, had leveled up. He was stunned by the upgrade and shouted with excitement, relieved that he no longer had to rely on Hisung's skills. He decided it was time to test it out with Ice Spear and recalled Hyeji telling him that he was strong. He imagined using Fireball alongside Blood Combat, estimating that the attack power would be overwhelming. Rushing off to find Hyeji, he told her to prepare for the field. Today, he planned to give them a proper ride on the metaphorical bus. Yet in the back of his mind, he wondered if this excitement had made him too relaxed. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to get careless. Just a moment later, Hyeji and her brother were both fully dressed for the field. Her brother, a rank 37 user, expressed concern, asking if they were really going to a C rank field with just the three of them. Hyeji, who was level 36, replied that they had wanted to check it out at least once. Juyeon chimed in, noting that the recommended level range for C rank fields was between 31 and 40. Despite this, he confidently claimed there would be no problem, even though he himself was only level 15. Hyeji's brother, however, was most worried about him. Hyeji's brother explained that while the system displayed a suggested level, the actual recommended level could vary significantly depending on party composition and field conditions. But Juyeon reassured them both that everything would be fine. He said he had a plan and confidently declared that he would sweep up all the experience for them, convinced that with blood combat grade X, there was nothing he couldn't handle. Later, in the C-rank field at Mount Unak Natural Recreation Forest, a field infamous for its mobile, plant-type monsters, they arrived prepared. Since the area used to be a public forest, it was filled with mutated trees, making it essential to bring at least 2 AoE skill dealers. Juyeon, however, believed today would be different. He launched a fireball at a nearby plant monster that attempted to attack them. The siblings watched in amazement as he took it down with a single strike. Juyeon already knew that fire was the most effective element against tree-type monsters. The system notified him that his fireball had received a 10% skill effect boost thanks to his enhance grade E trait. Excited, he took it as a good omen for today's hunt. He decided to copy only the buff portion of blood combat so he could track its stat increases accurately, and also copied a backup skill in case of emergencies. Wanting to test whether blood combat could be copied with his body cam footage as well, he activated his explosion technique to stylishly incinerate a cluster of tree monsters, finishing them off with a flashy last hit. Hyeji's brother looked at him suspiciously, while Juyeon smirked, thinking he had just triggered a bonus effect. Now he could copy up to 5 skills in total. As he laughed softly and continued burning the trees, Hyeji listened and watched in silence. She saw how confidently he moved, shouting at the monsters to die as he released waves of fire. In that moment, she realized why users referred to him as the psychopath. While Juyeon remained focused on skill testing and hunting, he failed to notice a man in a suit watching him from a distance. The man reported through a device that the target's location had been confirmed and that the skill appearance matched the psychopath. Elsewhere, in an office, a sharp knife was hurled in a fit of anger. It struck the screen displaying Juyeon's image. The person watching demanded to know how Juyeon had dared to appear again so soon, especially with so little time having passed. The knife embedded in the screen marked the center of Juyeon's face, and the man seethed with fury, convinced that Juyeon had completely lost his sense of fear. The masked leader then spoke, his voice cold and full of menace. He said Juyeon had walked to his death on his own, and if that was his wish, then it would be granted. A moment later, they had made their way deeper into the C-rank field, and had just finished defeating another monster. Juyeon was busy picking up the dropped items, proudly declaring that his level was skyrocketing after jumping from level 15 to 17. As he sifted through the remains, he noticed something unusual inside the boss. A bone. Curiously, he picked it up, initially assuming it was an item, but froze in place the moment he realized it was a human bone. Horror overtook him, and he screamed, instantly drawing the siblings' attention. Hyeji asked what had happened, and he stuttered while explaining that he had found a corpse. Still in shock, he admitted he had let his guard down, thinking no one else was around, and nervously asked if he might have hit someone by accident. Hyeji bent down to examine the bone, calmly reassuring him while inspecting it. She explained that fire alone wouldn't reduce someone to a clean skeleton unless they were entirely incinerated into bone dust. She pointed out that there was no way someone would come into the field without armor or a weapon, suggesting instead that the person had likely been player killed and looted. She concluded that they should report it to the cleanup squad. He asked her why she was so calm about it, and she told him that murder happened far more often in the field than people realized. It was difficult to distinguish from cult activity, making it hard to track. When he asked if she had ever come close to being player killed herself, she brightly replied that she had, and that it was by someone from her own party. That revelation stunned him. She continued, explaining that while they were out hunting, a party member had suddenly tried to strike her from behind. She remarked that it was easier to tell enemies apart when fighting monsters since monsters were always enemies. Humans, on the other hand, could never be fully trusted. One never knew when someone might turn and loot a corpse. Then she smiled at him warmly and proudly asked if he agreed that she was pretty. The unexpected shift in topic confused him. She clarified that when she was attacked, it wasn't just the items they were after. That incident had been her first time killing someone. Her brother, already familiar with her stories, simply listened in silence. She then shouted that the trash who came at her basically begged to be killed, so the aftermath hadn't been as traumatic as she expected. She warned Juyeon to be careful, noting that there were plenty of lunatics roaming the field. She also reminded him that if things ever got dangerous, he should hide behind her brother. Juyeon, who knew he couldn't exactly reveal that his average physical stat was over 35, responded confidently, saying he didn't think he'd die even if Kainal showed up right now. Hyeji gave him points for his boldness and agreed with a nod. He tried to tell her that he was being serious, but just then, a small metallic device rolled to his feet. Confused, he looked down and saw the system notify him that it was a pheromone bomb, grade B, a device filled with pheromones that applied a charm, grade B effect, upon detonation. The bomb exploded moments later, releasing a cloud of potent pheromone powder into the air. Suddenly, tree monsters emerged from all directions and began converging on their location. Yeji's brother quickly recognized the danger and shouted that it was a monster wave, moving in front to defend them. He instructed the others to stay behind him for now. But Juyeon didn't listen. Ignoring the warning, he charged ahead, proclaiming that he could handle the monsters on his own. In his excitement, he didn't realize that someone had aimed an arrow at him. Just as he distanced himself from the siblings, the arrow was released and struck him in the nape. Though it didn't pierce his skin and fell to the ground harmlessly, he immediately realized it was an ambush. He scoffed, calling his attackers idiots for only using one arrow, clearly unaware of his physical stats. Unfortunately, the arrow had applied slow and pain, grade A effects, both of which would last for 3 minutes. His knees buckled beneath him, and he collapsed, trembling from the pain. As the world blurred around him, a man stepped out from the shadows with a broad grin, declaring with malicious glee that it was hunting time. The siblings rushed toward Juyeon, but a tree monster charged at them before they could reach him. Fortunately, Hyeji noticed in time. She used her fire spear to incinerate it. The other tree monsters became more enraged and closed in quickly. Hyeji cursed under her breath, knowing that even on a normal day, these monsters were difficult to manage, and protecting Juyeon at the same time was nearly impossible. She realized she had to act fast. She instructed her brother to clear a path. He responded by lifting Juyeon onto his shoulder and told her to follow him. With sheer force, he began pushing through the tree monsters, shielding them while Hyeji continued burning the creatures from behind. Another pheromone bomb was thrown at them, but Hyeji reacted quickly and destroyed it with a burst of firestorm before it could detonate. She succeeded, but just then, the masked leader appeared. The masked figure confronted them, questioning where they thought they were going and accusing them of trying to flee without putting up a fight. Hyeji's brother demanded to know who he was. The man stated that he had business with the one her brother was carrying, referring to Juyeon, and claimed that if they handed him over, he might let the others live. The comment angered Hyeji's brother. Hyeji launched another fire spear at the intruder, but he remained still and effortlessly deflected the attack. She recognized his movement and suspected he had been present during the Kainel raid. The man taunted her, noting that while she was attractive, she was clearly clueless. He concluded that she would have to die as well and ordered his men to trigger another pheromone bomb. As the bomb detonated, the nearby tree monsters were drawn in once more. The man remarked that they couldn't rely on pheromone bombs forever and suggested they try to survive a little longer. Hyeji's brother did everything he could to protect Juyeon, pressing forward with his shield. Hyeji behind them rapidly cast fire magic to burn down the charging monsters. Juyeon trembled in pain, his body overwhelmed by the effects of the arrow. His limbs no longer responded properly, and everything felt like it was burning. He questioned how it had come to this and wondered if this would be the end. Then, distant screams from Hyeji and her brother reached his ears. Slowly, he opened his eyes. A splash of warm blood struck his face. In front of him were the corpses of slain monsters. Disoriented, he tried to comprehend what had just happened. His mind drifted back to Hyeji's earlier warning about hiding behind her brother when things became dangerous. That memory fueled his anger as everything that had just happened came rushing back to him. Hyeji, noticing him stir, asked if he was regaining consciousness and whether he could stand. Rather than respond, he reached for his phone. He admitted that it was shameless of him, but said he had a favor to ask. He pleaded with both of them to keep what they were about to witness a secret. Meanwhile, the masked man approached with his group, mocking the siblings for still holding up while carrying Juyeon. As a twisted reward, he promised to ensure it wouldn't hurt much. Hyeji cursed at him, but he ignored her, turning to Juyeon. He remarked that Juyeon had finally risen and sarcastically asked if it hurt badly. Juyeon admitted that it did. The man laughed at his pain, claiming Juyeon was pathetic for whining when he was about to be reduced to bones anyway. Juyeon remained silent and slowly raised one finger into the air. The attackers immediately raised their shields, expecting a fireball, and called him a fool for thinking it would work. Juyeon calmly questioned their certainty. Multiple magic circles appeared above them. The group looked up and quickly realized it wasn't a fireball. Recognition dawned on them. This was the mage who had taken Al's ring. Before they could act, Juyeon lowered his finger. The meteor rain skill activated. Meteors rained from the sky. The attackers scattered in panic. The masked man charged toward Juyeon, yelling that he was insane and questioning whether he planned to die along with everyone else. He tried to insult him, but before he could get close, Juyeon activated Bloody Fury, instantly tearing the man apart. As the meteors struck the ground, explosions erupted all around them. A few seconds later, the ground was shattered, and nothing was moving. However, Juyeon and the siblings were safe, standing clear of the devastated area. He looked down at his hand, then let himself collapse onto the ground in relief. After confirming they had survived, he realized that without the teleport skill, he would have died. Earlier, just past midnight, while adjusting his setup, he had copied Fireball and Explosion into Bloodstained Battle and noticed he had one skill slot left. He wondered what to fill it with and then saw a video of a user attempting to shoot an arrow at a bald man before teleporting away. He told himself it wasn't about lacking confidence in hunting but about preparing for emergencies. Everyone needed insurance. Without hesitation, he copied the teleport skill. The skill designated a mark on a target and when activated, allowed him to teleport to the marked location. He shouted in excitement at the discovery. It was essentially mass teleportation. Then, the system granted him additional bonuses, which thrilled him even more. With bonus slots now available, he couldn't help but dance, convinced that today must be his lucky day. Back in the present, the siblings looked at him suspiciously. He told them he would explain everything later. Hyeji agreed and, energized, encouraged them to pick up the items the attackers had dropped. But before they could move, they heard gasps from below. Users had gathered, staring up at the massive crater left in the ground, speculating whether Al had come through it because of the pit's enormous size. Juyeon, watching from above, realized he had saved his own life, but also knew it was now only a matter of time before his identity was discovered. He felt a wave of dread. He was truly in trouble. Just then, the system displayed a notification. He had reached level 20, and his unique subtrait had been unlocked. It was skill storage, graded at S. Later, inside the penthouse, he explained everything to the siblings. However, they stared at him in confusion. Hyeji asked if he had said Skill Master. He confirmed and clarified that it was an EX class that allowed him to copy and use all types of skills. Hyeji, surprised, asked if that was why he could use healing, damage, and buffs all at once, and if he could even use her skills. He told her it was possible. She pointed at her brother in disbelief and asked if he could copy even the skills her brother possessed. He confirmed again, but noted that being a tank without the right gear was still difficult. Intrigued, she questioned whether such a class was even possible and asked how many skills he could copy. He told her that the details were a secret, leaving her disappointed. Her brother then shifted the conversation to a more serious note, asking if Juyeon knew anything about the group that had attacked them. Juyeon responded that he believed they were the same people involved in the Kainal raid. Hyeji added that she had a hunch about their origin. When her brother asked where she thought they were from, she answered, "The Raider Guild." She went on to explain that he had probably heard of them, as there were rumors of a group collecting boss-level items. Juyeon agreed and mentioned that he had even encountered them once. Hyeji revealed that the group had once offered to recruit them, but only under the condition that they hand over any boss drops. That group had been the Raider Guild. He then asked how that connected to the player-killing group. Hyeji explained that among the items recovered from their attackers were several boss-tier items. Given the low drop rates of such items, it was rare, if not impossible, for multiple groups to gather them unless something else was at play. She added that the Raider Guild was a global organization with branches all over the world, and that they didn't even know who their true leader was. Upon hearing that he had made enemies with such a group, Juyeon turned pale with fear. A moment later, he finally lay down on Hyeji's large, soft bed, realizing that he had stirred up far too many incidents. His identity was on the verge of being exposed. He reminded himself that he needed to become stronger before that happened, and his best chance would be through skill rank-ups. He opened his status window. It displayed a total of 30,000 SP. He felt relieved. His steady accumulation of SP from daily quests had paid off. He knew he needed to ensure a consistent supply of SP, just in case completing daily quests became difficult in the future. He used 5,000 SP to level up his unique trait, Skill Master, to level 1. This upgrade increased his passive income to level 4, now giving him 1,000 SP every 24 hours at midnight. Still, he quietly wished SP would accumulate on its own while he was simply lying down. To reward the skill that had contributed the most during the recent battle, he used his remaining 25,000 SP on enhancing the blessing of his Skill Master trait. It leveled up from 2 to 3. With the upgrade, it now randomly granted 2 unique traits to a copied skill, allowing one of them to be selected and applied. Feeling refreshed, he leaned back and considered whether D-grade traits must be incredible, especially since even E-grade traits had already proven significantly effective. Next, he accessed his new unique trait, Skill Storage, rated grade S. The description indicated that it allowed him to use 1 copy count to store a skill. Stored skills would retain trait grants and maintain blue-level effects or higher until replaced. However, storing a new skill would consume 1 copy count, and copy count recharge would not apply. He sighed, thinking that if only he had unlocked this earlier, he could have permanently saved Bloodstained Battle at grade EX. He also knew that copying via video only replicated the skill at its original grade. Despite that, he already knew what skill he wanted to store. He chose Resistance to Change. The skill storage applied an amplification effect at grade D and added an F-grade optional trait. Now that the skill was stored, he could use it unlimited times from storage. He also decided to store Radiant Power and Bloodstained Battle. His plan was to keep rolling for rank-up bonuses through copying and to spend the next few days resting while doing so. Unfortunately for him, that rest was short-lived. Just a few hours later, he found himself standing beside the siblings in front of Muhammad Al. Al greeted them warmly, noting that it was their first time meeting in person. Juyeon panicked internally, wondering why Al had come to their house. He recalled that just as he had decided to rest, a visitor arrived, and to his surprise, it had been Al once again. Al acknowledged that Juyeon had caused quite a stir this time. However, he assured them that the rumors linking Juyeon to both the mage from the Kainal battle and the notorious Psycho had been quietly handled so they wouldn't spread. Juyeon was about to express his thanks, but before he could, Hyeji thanked Al on his behalf and asked what his true reason for visiting was. Al responded that there was no need for suspicion. He simply wanted to hear his friend's thoughts. He informed them that the ones who had attacked them were from a global-scale guild known as Raider. Hyeji noted that Al knew of them too. Al continued, revealing that he was already at war with the Raider Guild and, through that conflict, had obtained some interesting intelligence. He explained that the Raider group was secretly gathering at the Ganjiam Resort ski field in search of a hidden treasure left behind by their mysterious leader. This revelation shocked Juyeon, but the Kim siblings remained wary. Hyeji asked why Al was sharing such critical information and questioned why he couldn't take action himself. Al apologized, explaining that although he was willing to share intel through casual conversations, his actions attracted far too much attention for direct involvement. Suyeon then reminded Al of his upcoming schedule, prompting him to prepare to leave. Al stood and lamented how the best moments always seem to end too quickly. He expressed his wish for a more relaxed conversation next time. Before departing, Al looked at Juyeon and told him that how they chose to use the information was entirely up to them. He expressed his hope to hear their decision, whether they would choose to wipe out the enemy together or prioritize their own safety. Meanwhile, in front of the open special field, Tower of Destruction Grade A, masked individuals gathered at the side, waiting for someone. Eventually, a figure emerged from the field, carrying something behind them. It was the Raider Guild leader, Lin Xiaolong, who calmly walked out, dragging the red corpse of a dragon behind her. One of the masked men respectfully greeted her and addressed her. In response, she raised a finger, slamming him against the wall with force. She corrected him, stating that the former guildmaster was dead, which meant she was now the head of the Raider Guild. From that moment forward, they were to refer to her as boss. She released the dragon's corpse and reported that the monster's attack patterns had been identified up to the 20th floor. She ordered them to begin analyzing the monster materials immediately. She then turned to one of her subordinates and asked about the suppression progress of the old man's faction. The man reported that 98% of the followers from the previous generation had been eliminated, with the remaining remnants scheduled for disposal soon. She commended him on the good work and stated that the old man's hidden treasure in Korea must still be untouched. She instructed them to proceed with retrieving it as planned. Everyone accepted her command without hesitation. As she walked, her thoughts turned to the changing era. The time of making money like powerless, monkey-like users was over. Now was the age of superpowers. Those who conquered special fields and seized boss items would hold true power. She was certain that the throne belonged to her. Meanwhile, Juyeon and the Kim siblings arrived at the ski resort. Juyeon was in awe. It was his first time seeing the place. Hyeji asked if the view wasn't stunning and commented that it was a shame they couldn't enjoy themselves because of the monsters. Hyeji excitedly declared that they should finish their task quickly and return later to have fun. However, her brother expressed concern, still uncertain whether it had been a good idea for just the three of them to come alone. Days earlier, Hyeji had proposed that they strike the Raider Guild first. She revealed that she had sold the boss item dropped by one of the attackers under her own name when disposing of it. Her brother had been shocked, asking what she had done. She had calmly replied that she was already almost certainly a target, and that she and Juyeon now shared the same fate. Back in the present, her brother slapped his own face in frustration, realizing he had let his guard down, assuming things would resolve themselves naturally. Hyeji gently asked what he was worried about, and assured him that everything would be fine. They were three veterans who had already been through thick and thin. Hyeji then sprinted toward the field entrance, informing the others that to enter they needed to head in the direction visible from the lift on that side. However, a man stepped in their way and warned them that the field was under the control of the Enjoy Guild. He told them to leave unless they wanted to die. Hyeji questioned whether they were part of the user association or what gave them the right to claim control over an open field. Her words stopped abruptly as the man casually swung his sword, slicing off a few strands of her hair. The man chuckled and reminded her again that the ski resort field belonged to their guild. Juyeon, watching from behind, felt anger rise within him. He knew he wasn't a hero, not yet. But he questioned whether he shouldn't be the one to protect the things he cared about. The man teasingly told Hyeji that if she was upset, she could come over for a hug, promising to soothe her personally since she was pretty. Hyeji's brother cursed under his breath and prepared to confront the man, but before he could move, Juyeon pulled up his hood and released his fire magic. He told himself that if someone pointed a sword at one of his people and he had the power to break that sword, then there was no reason to stay idle. He approached the group, fireball in hand, and those nearby began whispering in recognition. This was the infamous psychopath. He asked the group at the entrance whether control wasn't something that only those with real power could claim, and if they wanted a taste of what it really felt like to be controlled. The arrogant man stammered, insisting that their guild had arrived first, so the area was theirs. Juyeon responded by hurling a fireball in front of them as a warning. The man was shocked that he had actually thrown it. Juyeon warned them that if he ever saw them again, he would kill them. The men, now trembling, quickly nodded and ran off in fear. Hyeji looked at her brother and remarked that Juyeon seemed different from usual. Her brother, however, kept his eyes fixed on Juyeon. Hyeji then called out to Juyeon and told him that his display of dominance was insane. Juyeon glanced back awkwardly and replied, a little shyly, that perhaps he could be quite dominant. Juyeon found it strange himself. It had been his first time threatening someone, but he had done it flawlessly. He wondered if intimidation might actually be his hidden talent. At the same time, inside the field, the Enjoy Guild was battling monsters. After several minutes, they defeated the last wave. One of the members laughed and shouted how refreshing it felt to not have to share contribution points with anyone else. He remarked that they should have taken control of the field sooner. Just then, a powerful fireball was hurled at him. Fortunately, he managed to leap out of the way. Furious, he demanded to know who had attacked. The attacker, calm and unwavering, simply asked who he thought he was and said he was just someone there to hunt. The Enjoy Guild member, still angry, asked if the newcomer hadn't heard anything from outside and reminded him that the field was under their control. The stranger responded with only a smile, which made the guild member uneasy. He tried to de-escalate by suggesting the stranger leave, warning him that the area was filled with level 40 monsters and it wasn't worth the effort, as there were plenty of other fields. The stranger continued to walk closer, and then an older man appeared from behind, stating that they should see who actually ends up leaving. The old man's forces charged without hesitation and began slaughtering the Enjoy Guild members. The old man turned to his right-hand man and remarked on the abundance of useless trash. The right-hand man apologized for failing to detect the guild's presence earlier and reported that the Enjoy Guild had apparently started controlling the field. The old man gave a new order. He instructed his right-hand man to divide the team into two groups, to search and eliminate all obstacles so their mission wouldn't be disrupted. Looking up at the mountain in the distance, the old man declared that they must reach the deepest and highest point within the field. They had to find the imitation bracelet, and they had to do it quickly.